My husband asked for a divorce. I want the house, the cars, the business, everything, he said. My lawyer begged me to fight. He slammed his hand on the table and whispered, Sienna, you are making a mistake. I just looked at him and said, give it all to him. Everyone in that courtroom thought I had lost my mind. The judge looked at me with pity. My husband Kevin looked at me with a smirk that made my stomach turn. At the final hearing, I took the pen. My hand didn't shake. I signed the papers. I signed over the deed to the mansion. I signed over the title to the luxury SUVs. I signed over the rights to the restaurant chain. Kevin leaned back in his chair. He was already calculating how much he would sell my life for. He thought he had won. He thought he had left me with nothing but the clothes on my back. He smiled a wide, arrogant smile until his high-priced lawyer leaned over. The lawyer's face was pale. He whispered 5 words into Kevin's ear that made him scream. He said, "The IP is not in the assets." Kevin's smile vanished. He didn't know I had already won. He didn't know that without me, he didn't just lose a wife, he lost his entire future. My name is Sienna, and I am 32 years old. Before I tell you how a simple signature destroyed my ex-husband's life, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. And if you have ever been underestimated by a man who thought he was smarter than you, hit that like and subscribe button. You are going to want to see this pay off. The noise inside the restaurant was deafening. It was a cacophony of crystal glasses clinking expensive laughter and the heavy bass of a jazz band playing in the corner. This was Kevin's Bistro. It was the hottest spot in downtown Atlanta, the kind of place where politicians and rappers rubbed elbows over $50 steaks. Tonight, the entire venue was closed down for a private event. It was my husband Kevin's 34th birthday, and I was not sitting at the head table. I was not wearing a designer gown. I was weaving through the crowded room, balancing a heavy silver tray of empty champagne flutes, trying to make myself invisible. "Move it, Sienna." Kevin snapped his fingers at me as he walked past. He didn't even look me in the eye. He just gestured toward a table of his investors. "They need more scotch. And try to smile. You look miserable, and it is bringing down the vibe." I adjusted the heavy tray. My wrists ached. I was wearing a black dress I had bought at Target for $20 3 years ago. It was faded and slightly too loose around the waist. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun. No makeup, just the tired face of a woman who worked 40 hours a week at the City Library Archive and then spent her nights managing the back end of this very restaurant. Kevin was wearing a custom Tom Ford suit that cost more than my annual library salary. He smelled of sandalwood and arrogance. I walked toward the bar to get the scotch. As I passed the VIP section, I felt a sudden cold splash across my chest. I gasped as red liquid soaked into the fabric of my cheap dress, dripping down to my waist. The room went silent for a split second. Oops! I looked up. Standing there was Tiffany, Kevin's half-sister. She was holding an empty wine glass, a smirk plastered across her face. She was wearing a glittering silver dress that barely covered her knees. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and her eyes were full of malice. She didn't offer a napkin. She didn't apologize. She just looked me up and down with a sneer that made my skin crawl. "You really should be more careful, Sienna," she said, her voice loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, although honestly I did you a favor. "That rag you are wearing was already a disaster. What is that polyester? It smells like wet dog and poverty." A few of her friends giggled. I stood there, the red wine seeping into my skin, feeling sticky and cold. I gripped the tray tighter. My knuckles turned white. I wanted to tell her that the wine she just wasted was a vintage Bordeaux that I had personally selected for the cellar. I wanted to tell her that the diamond earrings she was wearing were paid for by a loan I had secretly approved for her brother last Christmas. But I didn't. I just lowered my head. "I will go clean up," I said quietly. "No." Tiffany laughed, blocking my path. "Don't bother. You can't clean up trash, Sienna. You just take it out. Look around you. This is excellence. This is black excellence. Kevin is a king. He is building an empire. And you are just the help. You are a library rat who got lucky. My brother needs a queen, not a charity case he picked up from the gutter." I looked over at Kevin. He was standing just 10 feet away. He saw everything. He saw his sister humiliate his wife in front of his business partners. He saw the wine dripping down my dress. He took a sip of his drink and turned his back. That was the moment I knew. That was the moment the last shred of love I had for him evaporated. He wasn't just indifferent, he was in on it. The music stopped abruptly. The spotlight swung toward the small stage in the center of the room. Kevin walked up to the microphone, his smile dazzling the crowd. He raised his hands, and the room erupted in applause. Thank you, everyone," Kevin said, his voice smooth and commanding. "Tonight is a special night, not just because I am another year older, but because I have finally seen the light. I have finally realized what it takes to get to the next level." He paused for dramatic effect. The room leaned in. I stood in the shadows near the kitchen door, clutching a rag, wiping the wine from my chest. A man is defined by the company he keeps. Kevin continued, "And for a long time, I have been dragging around dead weight. I have been trying to fly while being anchored to the ground. But tonight, I am cutting the cord." My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew this speech. I had written similar speeches for him before, but this time the words were different. The cruelty was unscripted. "I want to introduce you to the future of Kevin's Bistro," he announced. "I want to introduce you to the woman who matches my ambition, the woman who actually belongs in this world. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the love of my life, Sarah." The double doors swung open. A woman walked out. She was stunning. She was tall, with skin the color of mahogany, and a body wrapped in a red silk gown that looked like it had been poured onto her. She was wearing diamonds that glittered under the stage lights. I recognized her immediately. Sarah was the hostess I had hired 6 months ago, the one who always asked too many questions about the bookkeeping, the one Kevin said was just a hard worker. She walked up to the stage and kissed Kevin passionately. The crowd cheered. Tiffany clapped the loudest, looking back at me with a triumphant grin. I felt like the floor was opening up beneath me. This wasn't just an affair. This was a public execution. Kevin pulled away from Sarah and looked directly at me. For the first time all night, he acknowledged my existence. He pointed at me, his finger like a loaded gun. "Sienna, come here," he commanded. The crowd parted. All eyes turned to me. The woman with the wine-stained dress. The wife who had just been replaced. I didn't move. I said, "Come here," Kevin repeated, his voice losing its charm. "Don't make a scene." I walked forward slowly. The humiliation burned my cheeks. I stopped at the edge of the stage. Kevin didn't offer me a hand. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He tossed it at my feet. It landed with a heavy thud. "Those are divorce papers," Kevin said into the microphone. "I signed them this morning." The room gasped. A few people whispered, but most just watched, hungry for the drama. "I am generous," Kevin said, looking down at me from the stage. "I am giving you $10,000. That is more money than you have ever seen in your life. Take it and go. Get out of my restaurant. Get out of my house. And for God's sake, buy yourself a new dress. You are embarrassing me." Sarah giggled and whispered something in his ear. Kevin laughed. "You see, Sienna?" He continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "You are a nice girl, but you are small. You think small. You live small. You belong in that dusty library with your old books. I am a visionary. I need a partner who understands power. Sarah understands power. You just understand how to take orders. So do us both a favor. Sign the papers, disappear, and let the adults handle business." I looked down at the envelope. Then I looked up at him. I looked at Sarah, preening like a peacock. I looked at Tiffany, who was recording the whole thing on her phone. They saw a defeated woman. They saw a victim. They saw a poor, pathetic wife being discarded for a newer model. They didn't see the truth. They didn't see that the music playing in the background, the jazz track everyone was bobbing their heads to, was a song I had written and produced under my pseudonym 3 years ago. A song that generated $40,000 a month in royalties. They didn't see that the lease for this building was not in Kevin's name. It was held by a shell company called SW Holdings. SW Sienna Washington, my maiden name. I bent down and picked up the envelope. The paper felt heavy in my hand. I dusted off a speck of dirt from the cover. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just looked Kevin dead in the eye. "Happy birthday, Kevin," I said. My voice was calm steady. It cut through the silence of the room. I turned around and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted for me, not out of respect but out of awkwardness. They thought I was walking away in shame. They thought I was running to my old Honda Civic to cry my eyes out. As I pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped out into the cool night air, I pulled out my phone. I had one notification. It was from my private banker. The quarterly distribution from my music publishing rights had just hit my account. $2.5 million. I looked back at the glowing sign of the restaurant. Kevin's Bistro. I smiled. Enjoy the party, Kevin. Enjoy the applause. Because when the music stops, you are going to realize that you didn't just kick your wife out. You just evicted your landlord, and the rent is about to go up. The drive home was a blur of red taillights and blurred vision. My 2010 Honda Civic rattled as I pushed it over 60 miles per hour on the highway. The air conditioning had broken 2 summers ago, so I drove with the windows down, letting the humid Atlanta night air whip against my face. It did nothing to dry the sticky sweet residue of the red wine that Tiffany had poured down the front of my dress. It was drying now, turning into a stiff, dark stain that smelled like fermentation and humiliation. Every time I inhaled, I smelled the embarrassment of that ballroom. I smelled the expensive cologne of the husband who had just discarded me like a piece of trash. I pulled into the driveway of the house, our house, or at least the house Kevin thought was ours. It was a sprawling Mediterranean-style villa in Buckhead, sitting on 2 acres of manicured lawn. I remembered the day we moved in. Kevin had walked around puffing on a cigar, talking about how the architecture suited his brand. I had walked around quietly checking the foundation, the wiring, and the property lines. I was the one who handled the paperwork. I was the one who set up the shell company that purchased the land. But tonight, looking at the warm yellow light spilling from the windows, it didn't feel like home. It felt like a fortress that had been captured by the enemy. I turned off the engine. The silence in the car was heavy. I grabbed my purse and stepped out. My legs felt heavy like I was walking through water. I walked up the stone path, the same path I had swept, and power washed myself just last weekend because Kevin said the landscaping crew was too expensive. I reached into my purse and pulled out my key ring. I found the brass key for the front door. I slid it into the lock. It didn't go in. I frowned and tried again. I jiggled it. I pushed harder. The key hit metal and stopped. It didn't fit. I pulled it out and looked at it, then looked at the lock. It was shiny. New, brushed nickel instead of the aged bronze that had been there this morning. My stomach dropped. He hadn't just served me papers. He had erased me. I rang the doorbell. Once, twice. I heard footsteps inside, high heels clicking on the hardwood floor. The door swung open. It wasn't Kevin. It was Tiffany. She was still wearing her silver party dress, holding a glass of white wine now. She leaned against the doorframe, looking at me with that same toxic mixture of pity and amusement she had worn at the restaurant. "You are persistent, aren't you, Sienna?" she said, taking a slow sip. "Let me in, Tiffany," I said, my voice hoarse. "All my things are in there. My clothes, my laptop." "Not anymore," she smiled. "We packed a few boxes for you. They are in the garage. But you can't come in. Kevin is very upset. He needs his rest. And honestly, you smell terrible. We can't have you stinking up the upholstery." I stepped forward, my hand reaching for the door. "This is my house, Tiffany. Move." Before I could touch the handle, blue and red lights flooded the driveway. I spun around. A police cruiser had pulled up silently behind my Honda. 2 officers were stepping out, their hands resting near their belts. Tiffany must have called them the moment I pulled into the driveway. She had been waiting for this. "Officer over here." Tiffany called out, her voice suddenly changing pitch. She sounded scared, fragile. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "She is trying to force her way in. I told her to leave." The officer, a tall white man with a buzz cut and a name tag that read Miller, walked up the driveway. He looked at the scene. He saw Tiffany, a blonde woman in a designer gown, standing in the doorway of a $3 million mansion. Then he looked at me. He saw a black woman with messy hair, a frantic expression, and a cheap black dress covered in a dark, suspicious stain. He saw the rusted Honda Civic in the driveway. He didn't see a homeowner. He saw a threat. "Ma'am, step away from the door." Officer Miller commanded, his hand hovering over his taser. I froze. I raised my hand slowly, palms open. I know how this goes. I know the statistics. I know that in this moment, my master's degree, my investment portfolio, and my clean record didn't matter. Officer, I live here, I said calmly. My name is Sienna. That is my sister-in-law. My husband is inside. They changed the locks without notifying me. This is an illegal eviction. The officer looked at Tiffany. Is that true, ma'am? Tiffany clutched her pearls. Officer, my brother owns this house. This woman is his ex-wife. She is unstable. She came to his birthday party tonight and made a huge scene screaming and throwing wine. Look at her dress. She is drunk. We are terrified she's going to do something violent. The officer turned back to me, his eyes narrowed. He smelled the wine on my dress and assumed Tiffany was telling the truth. Ma'am, have you been drinking? He asked. No, I said firmly. This is wine she threw on me. I need you to step back to your vehicle, he said, his voice dropping an octave. This is private property. The owner has asked you to leave. If you don't leave voluntarily, I will arrest you for trespassing and disorderly conduct. I looked at him. I looked at the way he stood blocking me from my own home, protecting the woman who was lying to his face. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him to run the deed. I wanted to tell him to check the bank accounts. I wanted to pull out my phone and show him that I paid the property taxes on this land 2 months ago. But I looked at Tiffany. She was smiling. She wanted me to fight. She wanted me to get arrested. A mugshot would ruin my credibility in the divorce hearing. A night in jail would give Kevin the ammunition he needed to claim I was mentally unstable. They were baiting me, and I wasn't going to bite. I took a deep breath. I lowered my hands. Okay, I said. I will leave. Tiffany let out a small, victorious laugh. Good choice. I turned to Officer Miller. I looked him dead in the eye. I didn't blink. I didn't look down. Officer Miller, I said clearly, I am complying with your order, but I want you to verify one thing for me. Is your body camera recording? He looked surprised. Yes, it is. Good, I said, because I wanted on the official record that I, Sienna Washington, informed you that I am a legal resident of this address and that I have been denied entry. I want you to write down in your report that the caller, Tiffany Hayes, admitted to being inside the home. Please make sure you spell her name correctly. Tiffany. Why does that matter? The officer asked, confused by my sudden shift in tone. Because, officer, I said, smoothing down my stained dress. When the lawsuit for illegal eviction and civil conspiracy is filed, I want to make sure the subpoena goes to the right person. And I want to make sure your report is accurate so you are not named as a co-defendant. The officer blinked. He looked at Tiffany, then back at me. For a second, he looked uncertain. The confidence in my voice didn't match the car I drove, but it was too late. He had already chosen a side. Just get in your car, ma'am, he muttered, pointing toward the street. I walked down the driveway. I didn't look back at Tiffany. I got into my Honda. The engine sputtered as I turned it on. I backed out slowly, careful not to hit the curb. I saw the officer watching me until I turned the corner. I drove for 10 minutes until I found a 24-hour Walmart parking lot. I parked in the back under a flickering street lamp. I turned off the car and locked the doors. The silence came rushing back. The adrenaline faded, leaving me shivering. It was getting cold, and the damp dress clung to my skin like a disease. I reclined the driver's seat as far back as it would go. I curled up, pulling my knees to my chest. A tear finally escaped. Just one. It rolled down my cheek, hot and angry. I was 32 years old. I was a genius at analyzing market trends. I had built a fortune from the shadows. And here I was sleeping in a 10-year-old car in a Walmart parking lot because the man I loved had decided I wasn't enough. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I wiped my face and picked it up. The screen was bright in the dark car. It wasn't a text from Kevin apologizing. It wasn't a message from my mother asking if I was okay. It was a notification from my secure banking app. Subject quarterly royalty distribution, Q3. Status processed. Amount $2, $542,000 USD. Available balance, $43, $890, $1,000 USD. I stared at the numbers. The blue light illuminated my face. I read it again. $2.5 million. I looked around the dark parking lot. I looked at the stained dress. I looked at the old dashboard. A laugh bubbled up in my throat. It started low and quiet, then it got louder. I laughed until my ribs hurt. I laughed until the tears stopped. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had taken everything. Kevin thought he had won the lottery by kicking me out. I typed a quick note into my phone's memo pad. Item 1 for lawyer breach of fiduciary duty. Item 2, illegal lockout. I closed my eyes. The seat was uncomfortable, and it was freezing, but for the first time all night I felt warm. Let them have the house for tonight. Let them drink the wine. Let Tiffany sleep in the guest room thinking she is a queen. Because tomorrow I wasn't going to be the wife. I wasn't going to be the victim. Tomorrow I was going to be the creditor. And collection day was coming. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor of the Sterling and Associates building was silent and suffocating. The doors opened to a lobby that smelled of expensive leather and intimidation. This was where Kevin had insisted we meet. Not a coffee shop, not a mediator's office, but here in the shark tank of the most aggressive divorce attorney in Atlanta. I walked in wearing my usual work clothes, a gray cardigan and black slacks, clutching my worn-out purse. The receptionist didn't even look up when I gave my name. She just buzzed me through. I entered the conference room. It was a glass box floating in the sky overlooking the city I secretly owned a significant piece of. Kevin was already sitting at the long mahogany table. He was flanked by his lawyer, Mr. Sterling, a man whose billboards I had seen on the highway promising to destroy ex-wives. Kevin didn't stand up. He didn't look at me. He was busy scrolling on his phone, probably texting Sarah about how he was about to get rid of his baggage. I sat down opposite them. The chair was too big designed to make me feel small. Mr. Sterling didn't waste time with pleasantries. He slid a thick document across the table. It stopped inches from my hands. Then he slid a check on top of it. I looked at the number. $10,000. Mr. Sterling leaned forward, clasping his hands. Sienna, let us be realistic. We know your financial situation. We know you work at the library. We know you have student loans. Kevin wants to be fair. He wants to be generous. This check is a gesture of goodwill. It is $10,000. It is enough for you to get a new apartment, maybe pay down some of that debt and start over. Kevin finally looked up. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth I had seen when we first met 5 years ago. Look, Sienna, he said, his voice flat. I don't want to drag this out. I have a business to run. I have a reputation to protect. You and I both know you can't afford a lawyer who can go toe-to-toe with Sterling. If we go to trial, you will end up with nothing. This is me being a nice guy. Take the money, sign the waiver, walk away. I looked at the check again. $10,000. It was an insult wrapped in a favor. Kevin thought this was life-changing money for me. He thought this would save me from poverty. He had no idea that $10,000 was what my investment portfolio generated in interest every single morning while I brushed my teeth. He looked at me and saw a charity case. He saw a woman who clipped coupons and drove a car with a broken air conditioner. He didn't see the CEO of SW Holdings. I stayed silent, letting the silence stretch. I wanted them to talk. I wanted them to reveal their hand. Men like Kevin and Mr. Sterling couldn't stand silence. They had to fill it with their own importance. You should take the deal, Sienna, Mr. Sterling pressed, tapping the document. The law is clear. Kevin's assets are tied up in his business. The restaurant, the brand, it was all built on his sweat equity. You were just there. You didn't contribute capital. You didn't manage operations. A judge isn't going to give you half of an empire you didn't help build. I almost laughed out loud. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep a straight face. I didn't help build it. Who stayed up until 3 a.m. fixing the payroll system when the first manager quit? Me, who negotiated the vendor contracts to lower food costs by 15%. Who quietly transferred $50,000 of inheritance money into the business account when Kevin couldn't make payroll 3 years ago? Me. But Mr. Sterling was right about one thing. On paper, my name wasn't on the restaurant's operating agreement. Kevin had insisted on that. He wanted to be the face of the company. He wanted the glory. I had agreed, but I wasn't stupid. I knew that in business, the person who owns the operations is the manager, but the person who owns the intellectual property is the king. Before I married Kevin, back when I was just starting my career in copyright law and music licensing, I had formed a limited liability company in Delaware. Delaware has the strongest corporate privacy laws in the country. My name does not appear on public records. That LLCSW Holdings was the legal entity that purchased the trademarks, the recipes, and the branding rights for Kevin's Bistro before it even opened. I had leased those rights to Kevin's operating company for $1 a year. It was a standard licensing agreement, and like all standard agreements, it had a termination clause. Kevin didn't know that. He thought Kevin's Bistro belonged to him because his name was on the door. He didn't understand that he was just a tenant in his own business. I looked up at Kevin, widening my eyes to look fearful. "But Kevin," I whispered, my voice trembling just enough to sell the performance. "What about the house? What about our life? $10,000 won't last a year in this city." Kevin sighed, rolling his eyes. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the skyline. "Sienna, stop being dramatic. The house is in my name. I paid the mortgage. You paid..." "What?" "The electric bill. The groceries. That doesn't buy you equity. You need to face reality. You are a 32-year-old archivist. You are not a business partner. You are not a co-owner. You are a wife who didn't work out." He turned back to me, his face hard. "Sarah is moving in next week. I need you gone. I need this signed today. If you don't sign, I will withdraw the $10,000. I will let Sterling bury you in legal fees until you are begging for bankruptcy." "Is that what you want?" I looked at Mr. Sterling. He nodded in agreement. "It is a simple choice, Sienna. $10,000 today or ruin tomorrow." I looked down at my hands. I thought about the document in front of me. It was a marital settlement agreement. It stated that I waived all rights to spousal support. It stated that I waived all claims to the business entities known as Kevin's Management Group, LLC. It stated that I accepted the $10,000 as full and final payment. It was a trap. But not for me. By forcing me to sign this, Kevin was legally declaring that he wanted nothing to do with my assets either. He was so focused on protecting his imaginary empire that he was inadvertently signing away his claim to my real one. If I signed this, he couldn't come after my royalties. He couldn't touch my investment accounts. He couldn't touch SW Holdings. He was walling himself off from $40 million to save $10,000. I picked up the pen. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen. "Kevin," I said softly, "if I sign this, are we truly done? You promise you won't come after me for anything else. You won't ask for, I don't know, contribution to debts." Kevin laughed, a cruel barking laugh. "Debts. Sienna, you are the one with debts. I am debt-free. I am rich. I don't need a dime from you. Just sign the paper and get out of my life." He was debt-free because I had been secretly paying off his business loans for 2 years. He didn't know that either. God, the awakening was going to be brutal. I uncapped the pen. I hesitated, letting my hand shake. I wanted them to remember this moment. I wanted them to remember how small they made me feel, so that when the tables turned, they would understand exactly why I showed no mercy. "Okay," I said. "I will sign." Kevin smirked at Mr. Sterling. "See, I told you she would fold." I put the pen to the paper. The ink flowed smoothly. I signed my name, Sienna Washington. I dated it. I pushed the document and the pen back across the table. I left the check for $10,000 sitting there. "Aren't you going to take the money?" Mr. Sterling asked, confused. I stood up. I smoothed out my cardigan. I looked at Kevin one last time. I memorized his face, the arrogance, the relief, the smug satisfaction of a man who thought he had just discarded a piece of trash. "Keep it," I said. Kevin frowned. "What?" "Keep the $10,000, Kevin," I said, walking toward the door. "You are going to need it for the legal fees." I walked out of the conference room before he could respond. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with adrenaline. I didn't take the elevator down. I walked to the stairwell. I needed to move. I needed to breathe. As the heavy door clicked shut behind me, I pulled out my phone and dialed my own lawyer. "Jessica," I said as soon as she picked up. "I'm here, Sienna," her sharp voice answered. "Did he sign?" "He signed," I said. "And I signed." "The waiver is executed," good Jessica said. I can hear her typing furiously in the background. "That means the asset division is closed. He has legally disclaimed any interest in your financial holdings. We are in the clear." "Execute the termination notice," I said. My voice was no longer the trembling whisper of a scared wife. It was the voice of the CEO. "Terminate the licensing agreement for the brand Kevin's Bistro, effective immediately." "And Jessica?" "Yes, boss. Send the eviction notice for the commercial property, too. He missed his rent payment yesterday. He thought I wouldn't notice because of the divorce." I hung up the phone. I walked down the stairs, my heels clicking a rhythm of war. He thought I was financially illiterate. He thought I was just a librarian. He forgot that a librarian's job is to archive history, and I had kept receipts for everything. The morning after the meeting at the law firm started with a headache that felt like a hammer hitting the back of my skull. Stress does that to me. It tightens my muscles until I can barely turn my neck. I needed my migraine prescription. I walked into the CVS on 14th Street, the same one I had been going to for 6 years. The fluorescent lights were humming loudly. I stood in line behind a man buying diapers and a pack of gum clutching my purse. When it was my turn, I handed the pharmacist my card. It was the debit card linked to the joint checking account Kevin and I shared. The account where my library paycheck was deposited every 2 weeks. The account that paid for the groceries, the electric bill, and the dry cleaning for Kevin's suits. The pharmacist, a kind older woman named Mrs. Higgins, ran the card. She frowned. She ran it again. The machine let out a harsh buzzing sound. Declined. I felt the heat rise up my neck. "That is impossible," I said. "I just got paid on Friday. There should be at least $2,000 in there." "Try it again, dear," she said softly. She ran it a third time. Declined. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from a sudden cold realization. I logged in. The screen loaded. Balance $0.00. Status frozen. I stared at the screen. A notification popped up at the top. Account frozen by co-owner Kevin Hayes per pending litigation. He had done it. He had actually done it. He knew that account was my lifeline. He knew that was the money I used to put gas in my car to get to work. He knew I had bills due today. He hadn't just taken his share. He had locked me out of my own salary. "I am sorry, Mrs. Higgins," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I will have to call the bank." "That is all right, honey," she said. "Do you want to use your insurance for the copay? We can just bill you later for the rest." "Yes, please," I said, relieved. At least I could get the medicine. She typed into her computer. Then she stopped. Her face fell. She looked at me over her glasses with pure pity. "Sienna, I am so sorry. The system says your coverage was terminated yesterday." I froze. Terminated. He didn't just freeze the money. He cut off my health insurance. He knew I got migraines. He knew I had a family history of high blood pressure. He stripped me of my protection less than 24 hours after I signed that waiver. This was not about asset division. This was punishment. He wanted me to suffer. He wanted me to crawl back to him and beg for a check so I could buy medicine. I left the pharmacy empty-handed. My head was pounding harder now, a rhythmic thumping that synced with the rage building in my chest. I sat in my Honda Civic in the parking lot. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I forced myself to breathe. Then my phone pinged. An Instagram notification. Kevin Hayes, CEO, just posted a new photo. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't have looked. But my thumb moved on its own. I opened the app. The photo was high definition, bright and loud. It was taken in the driveway of our house. My house. In the background, the garage door was open. Parked right in the center of the driveway was a Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. It was brand new, painted a matte white with a massive red bow on the hood. Sarah was sitting on the hood. She was wearing a white bikini that matched the car, holding a bottle of champagne. Her legs were crossed, and she was throwing her head back in laughter. Kevin was standing next to the driver's side door, leaning against the frame, looking like he owned the world. The caption read, "New toy for the new queen. Upgrade your life. Upgrade your wife. Hashtag blessed, hashtag power couple, G63. I felt bile rise in my throat. A G-Wagon cost at least $180,000. Where did he get that kind of cash? His restaurant had cash flow issues last month. I knew that because I was the one who smoothed it over with the vendors. He didn't have liquid capital like that. Unless... I quickly switched apps. I went to the savings account, the one labeled emergency fund. This was not a joint account in the traditional sense. It was an account I had opened in my name, but I had added Kevin as an authorized user, so he could access it in case something happened to me. It was the account where I put every single bonus I ever got from the library, every tax refund, every $50 I saved by clipping coupons. For 5 years, I had scrimped and saved to build that fund. It had $52,000 in it. It was supposed to be for a down payment on a rental property. It was supposed to be for our future children. I clicked on the account. Balance 0. Transaction history withdrawal via cashier's check. $52,000. Authorized by Kevin Hayes. He stole it. He took 5 years of my sacrifice, 5 years of me eating leftovers and wearing old clothes, and he used it as a down payment on a car for his mistress. He took the money I saved for our children and gave it to the woman who destroyed our marriage. The cruelty was breathtaking. It was precise. He wasn't just spending money. He was spending my effort. He was taking the tangible proof of my love and labor and converting it into a trophy for someone else. I stared at the photo again. Sarah's smile seemed to mock me. Kevin's posture screamed victory. He thought he had cut my legs out from under me. He thought I was sitting in this parking lot crying over a declined debit card and a stolen savings account. He thought he had checkmated me. He forgot one thing. He was playing checkers. I was playing 4D chess. He thought that $50,000 was a lot of money. He thought that freezing a checking account with $2,000 in it would starve me out. He had no concept of the scale I operated on. He was fighting a ground war while I controlled the satellites. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. My headache was still there, but now it was different. It was cold, sharp, focused. I started the car. I didn't drive home. I drove to a quiet park overlooking the city skyline. I needed silence for this next move. I pulled out my other phone, the burner phone I kept for SW Holdings business, the one Kevin didn't know existed. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 6 months. It rang twice. Sienna, a deep voice, answered. It was Marcus, my portfolio manager at Vanguard. I didn't expect to hear from you until the quarterly review. Everything okay? No, Marcus, I said. Everything is not okay. I need to make a trade. Okay, he said, the sound of typing clicking in the background. What are we buying, tech real estate? We are not buying, I said. We are selling. Selling. Marcus paused. The market is down slightly today, Sienna. It might be better to hold. I want you to look at my portfolio, I said. Look at the diversified food services sector. Look for Apex Food Supply, Apex Marcus asked. You have a significant position there. You own about 7% of their outstanding shares. It is a solid dividend stock. They supply half the restaurants in the Southeast. I know who they supply. I cut him off. They are the exclusive supplier for Kevin's Bistro. They provide his steaks, his wine, his produce. He has a credit line with them because the major shareholder vouchsafed for him. I see Marcus said, his voice lowering. He was smart. He knew about the divorce. He connected the dots instantly. I want to sell, I said. All of it, Marcus asked. That is a lot of volume, Sienna. If you dump 7% of the stock at once, you will crash the price. You will lose money on the trade. I don't care about the loss, I said. I have $40 million, Marcus. I can afford to lose a few $100,000 to make a point. But I don't want to dump it all at once. That is too fast. If the stock crashes too hard, the board will halt trading. I want this to be painful. I want it to be a slow bleed. Okay, Marcus said slowly. What is the strategy? Sell 20% of my position today, I instructed. Do it right before the market closes. It will cause a panic dip. Then tomorrow morning, call the board of directors at Apex. Tell them that SW Holdings is losing confidence in the company's risk management. Tell them we are concerned about their exposure to high-risk clients who are defaulting on payments. High-risk clients, Marcus asked. Yes, I said. Specifically clients who just bought luxury cars while their business accounts are in the red. Kevin's Bistro is on a net 30 payment term with Apex. I want you to pressure the board to revoke his credit line. Tell them if they don't call in his debts immediately, SW Holdings will liquidate the rest of the position and tank their stock price. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Marcus breathing. This was aggressive. This was corporate warfare. Sienna, he said finally, if they revoke his credit line, he won't be able to order food. No steaks, no wine. He won't be able to open the doors this weekend. I know, I said coldly. He has that big post-birthday brunch scheduled for Sunday, Marcus added. If he has no inventory, then he better start cooking that G-Wagon, I said. Marcus let out a low whistle. Remind me never to cross you, Sienna. Just execute the trade, Marcus, I said. And one more thing. Yes, take the proceeds from the sale of the Apex stock. I want you to buy the debt. Buy the debt. Yes, Kevin has a business loan with Regional Bank. It is a variable rate loan. I want you to approach the bank and offer to buy the note. SW Holdings will become his lender. You want to be his bank? Marcus asked. No, I said. I want to be his executioner. When he defaults on his payments because he can't sell food, I want to be the one who signs the foreclosure papers. Understood, Marcus said. The trade is queued. It will execute in 10 minutes. I hung up the phone. I leaned back in the seat. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the city. I thought about Kevin and Sarah driving around in that white SUV. I thought about them laughing at me. Enjoy the ride, Kevin. Because the gas pump just got turned off. I put the car in gear and drove away. I still needed to get my migraine medicine, but I didn't feel the pain anymore. The adrenaline of the kill was the only painkiller I needed. He took my $5,000. I just wiped out his supply chain worth $500,000. And the best part? He wouldn't know it was me. When the supplier calls him tomorrow to demand cash on delivery, he will blame the economy. He will blame the market. He will scream at his manager. He will never suspect that the woman he left crying in a parking lot was the one pulling the strings from the sky. 2 days after I froze their supply chain, my phone buzzed with a text message that I never expected to see. It was from Tiffany, the same Tiffany who had poured wine on me, the same Tiffany who had called the police on me. The text was short and surprisingly polite. Can we talk? I think things have gone too far. Meet me at the Golden Bean on Peachtree at 10 a.m. Just us. I stared at the screen. My first instinct was to delete it. I had nothing to say to her. But then my brain kicked in, the analytical brain that had built a $40 million fortune. Why would she want to meet now? Why the sudden change in tone? Kevin was arrogant, but Tiffany was vindictive. She didn't do peace treaties. She did ambushes. I sat at my kitchen table in the small Airbnb I had rented for the week. It was a stark contrast to the mansion, but it was clean, and it was mine. I tapped my fingers on the wood surface. If she wanted to meet, she wanted something. She was likely fishing for information, or worse, she was trying to set me up. I checked my watch, my Apple Watch Ultra. It was a gift I bought for myself last year. It looked like a standard fitness tracker, but it had a high-fidelity voice memo feature that could pick up a whisper from across the room. I smiled. If she wanted a meeting, I would give her a performance. I arrived at the Golden Bean at 10 sharp. It was a trendy spot with exposed brick walls and overpriced coffee served by baristas with handlebar mustaches. I saw Tiffany immediately. She was sitting in a corner booth far away from the counter. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a silk scarf wrapped around her head, like she was a celebrity trying to be incognito. I walked over. I was wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt. I looked tired. I made sure to slump my shoulders slightly. I wanted her to see a broken woman. I wanted her to think I was defeated. As I approached the table, I noticed something immediately. Tiffany had her phone placed face down on the table. It was angled slightly toward my empty chair. A classic move. The microphone was at the bottom of the phone. She was recording. I knew exactly what this was. Georgia is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. That means as long as one person in the conversation knows it is being recorded, it is legal. She was trying to get me to say something crazy. She wanted me to threaten Kevin. She wanted me to scream or curse so she could play the tape in court and get a restraining order. A restraining order would hurt my credibility and possibly affect the final divorce decree. I sat down slowly. Tiffany took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but I could tell it was makeup. She was trying to look sympathetic. "Hi, Sienna," she said, her voice soft. "Thank you for coming." I didn't say anything. I just looked at her phone, then I looked at her. I tapped the side of my watch, casually activating the recording app. "What do you want, Tiffany?" I asked, my voice low. She sighed and reached across the table to touch my hand. I pulled back. She flinched, but recovered quickly. "Look, I know things got ugly at the party," she said. "I shouldn't have thrown the wine. I was drunk. And Kevin is just under so much pressure. You know how he is. He lashes out when he is stressed. I waited. This was the bait. She was trying to normalize the abuse to see if I would snap. He kicked me out of my house, Tiffany," I said. "He left me with nothing." "I know," she said, shaking her head. "And that is why I wanted to see you. I feel bad, Sienna. I really do. I told Kevin he was being too harsh. I think we can work something out. Maybe we can get you some more money. Maybe we can get you your car back." I narrowed my eyes. This was the hook. She was offering a carrot. "But you have to understand his position," she continued, leaning in. "He is building an empire. He can't have negative energy around him. He needs a wife who supports the vision. You were always so cautious. You were always worrying about budgets and rules. It suffocated him." There it was. The jab. She wanted me to defend myself. She wanted me to yell that Kevin was a reckless idiot. I took a deep breath. I leaned back in the chair. "I was cautious because I didn't want him to go to jail, Tiffany," I said quietly. Tiffany froze. Her eyes flicked to her phone, then back to me. "What are you talking about?" I leaned in closer, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I knew she would have to lean in too to catch the audio. "I am talking about the books, Tiffany. Why do you think I was so worried all the time? I saw the invoices. I saw the cash flow. The restaurant doesn't make enough profit to support his lifestyle. It definitely doesn't make enough to buy a G-Wagon." Tiffany scoffed. A flash of her real personality broke through the fake sympathy. "You just don't understand high finance, Sienna. That is your problem. You have a library mindset. Kevin is a visionary. He has investors. He has cash flow you don't even know about." I shook my head, looking genuinely concerned. "No, Tiffany. That is what I am trying to tell you. I think he is in trouble. Real trouble. I think he is taking money from loan sharks or something, because the numbers don't add up. If the IRS audits him..." I let the sentence hang. I saw the trigger pull. Tiffany's ego couldn't handle the insinuation that her brother was a failure or a criminal victim. She needed to prove that they were smarter than me. She needed to prove that they were winning because of their brilliance, not because of luck. She laughed. A harsh, arrogant sound. The mask dropped completely. "You are so naive," she sneered. "You think you know everything because you paid the electric bill. You don't know half of what Kevin does. You think we are scared of the IRS? Please. Kevin is 10 steps ahead of them." I kept my face neutral, but my heart was racing. "Keep going, Tiffany. Keep talking." How I asked, innocent and wide-eyed. "You can't hide a car purchase, Tiffany. That is on the record." She rolled her eyes. She picked up her coffee cup and took a sip, getting comfortable in her arrogance. She forgot about her own recording because she was too busy trying to humiliate me. "It is not on the record if you don't buy it with taxable income," she said, lowering her voice but speaking clearly. "You remember those private catering events we did last year? The ones for the rappers and the politicians? The ones you whined about because they were too rowdy? The ones where he demanded payment in cash," I said. "Exactly," she grinned. $300,000 in cash, Sienna. Unmarked, untraced. It never touched the business bank account. It went straight into the safe deposit box. That is the real money. That is the money that bought the car. That is the money that pays for the trips. Kevin doesn't report that. Why should he give 30% to the government when he did all the work? My watch was recording every syllable. She had just admitted to tax evasion, felony tax evasion. "But isn't that dangerous?" I asked, pushing just a little harder. "What about the inventory?" If he buys food for those events, the inventory counts will be off. The accountant will notice. She waved her hand dismissively. Kevin fired the accountant last month. He handles the books himself now. He just marks the extra food as spoilage or waste. It is a write-off. He saves money on taxes by claiming a loss on the food he actually sold for cash profit. It is genius. She looked at me triumphantly. So, you see, Sienna, she said, you were worrying about pennies while Kevin was printing dollars. That is why you don't fit in. You are too scared to break the rules. I sat back. I had it. I had the confession. I had the method. I had the admission of falsifying business records. I had the admission of money laundering. And I had it all in her voice, the voice of the business manager. I looked at Tiffany. I looked at her expensive sunglasses and her smug smile. I felt a strange sense of calm. You are right, Tiffany, I said. I guess I just don't have the stomach for that kind of risk. Exactly, she said, thinking she had won the argument. She tapped her phone. I saw the screen light up. She stopped her recording. She probably thought she had a great clip of me admitting I was scared and didn't understand. She didn't realize she had just handed me the nuclear codes. Well, she said, standing up, I am glad we talked. I will tell Kevin you are being reasonable. Maybe he will let you keep the Honda if you sign the rest of the papers quietly. She threw a $20 bill on the table. For the coffee, she said, since I know things are tight for you. I looked at the money, then I looked at her. Thank you, Tiffany, I said. You have been very helpful today. You have no idea how helpful. She frowned, slightly confused by my tone, but she brushed it off. She turned and walked out of the coffee shop, her heels clicking on the floor. I waited until she was out the door. Then I tapped my watch and stopped the recording. I hit save. I renamed the file Tiffany Confession Tax Fraud. I picked up the $20 bill. I walked over to the tip jar on the counter and dropped it in. The barista looked at me surprised. Have a nice day, I told him. I walked out into the sunshine. I pulled out my phone and called Jessica, my lawyer. Did she show up? Jessica asked. Oh, yes, I said, unlocking my car, and she was very talkative. Did you get anything useful? Jessica asked. I got everything I said. She admitted to cash skimming unreported income and falsifying inventory records to claim fraudulent tax deductions. She admitted the G-Wagon was purchased with laundered money. Jessica let out a low whistle. That is not just leverage for the divorce, Sienna. That is leverage for a federal indictment. What do you want to do? Not yet, I said, starting the engine. I don't want to go to the police yet. If we arrest them now, the assets get seized by the government. I want the assets. So we hold it? Jessica asked. We hold it, I said. We use it to squeeze him. But first, I need to make sure he really feels the pressure. How is the supply chain freeze working? It is working, Jessica said. I heard from a contact at the bank. Kevin was in there this morning screaming at the loan officer. His credit line is locked. He can't place the order for the Sunday brunch. He is desperate. Good, I said. Let him sweat for a few more days. Let him think it is just bad luck. I drove back to my Airbnb. I felt lighter. Tiffany thought she had intimidated me. She thought she had put me in my place. She didn't realize that by opening her mouth, she had just given me the key to not just the house, but to their freedom. I sat down at my laptop and opened my secure cloud storage. I uploaded the audio file. Then I made 2 backup copies, one on an external hard drive and one sent to a secure email server. I looked at the file name. Tiffany Confession. It was ironic, really. They always said I was quiet. They always said I didn't speak up enough. But in the end, it wasn't my voice that would destroy them. It was their own. My stomach growled. I realized I hadn't eaten since yesterday. I walked to the fridge and pulled out a sandwich. I took a bite and stared out the window. The game had changed. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice. Kevin had built his castle on sand, and Tiffany had just handed me the hose. I wondered what they were doing right now. Probably laughing, probably planning their next party, probably toasting to their own brilliance. Laugh while you can, I whispered, because the bill is coming due, and unlike your taxes, you can't dodge this one. The air in Mr. Sterling's office was different this time. 2 days ago, it smelled like expensive leather and intimidation. Today, it smelled like desperation, masked by cheap cologne. I sat in the same chair I had occupied 48 hours ago, but the dynamic had shifted. Kevin was shifting in his seat. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes that even his expensive concealer couldn't hide. His knee was bouncing up and down a nervous tic he developed whenever cash flow was tight. I knew that bounce. I had seen it when we were dating and he couldn't make rent. I had seen it when the restaurant opened and the first reviews were mixed. Seeing it now gave me a perverse sense of satisfaction. My supply chain freeze was working. He was bleeding and he didn't know why. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. He placed a folder on the table. It wasn't the settlement agreement this time. It was a black folder, the kind you see in movies when the villain is about to reveal the twist. "Sienna, we have a problem," Mr. Sterling said. His voice was grave. It was a performance, a bad one. I crossed my legs and waited. I didn't ask what the problem was. I let the silence stretch. I learned a long time ago that in a negotiation, the first person to speak loses. Kevin couldn't handle the silence. He slammed his hand on the table. "Don't look at us like that, Sienna," he snapped. "You think you are so innocent. You think you are the victim here. We know what you did." I raised an eyebrow. "What did I do, Kevin? Did I pay your bills on time? Did I clean your house? Did I support your dreams while you slept with your hostess?" Mr. Sterling held up a hand to silence Kevin. He opened the black folder. He slid 3 photographs across the polished mahogany table. "We had a private investigator follow you," Mr. Sterling said. "These were taken last week." I looked at the photos. I expected to see me at the grocery store. I expected to see me walking into the library. Instead, I saw something that made me want to laugh out loud. The first photo showed a woman who looked vaguely like me from the back walking into a hotel room. The second photo showed the same woman sitting at a bar holding hands with a man. A tall, muscular man who looked like he spent too much time at the gym and not enough time reading books. The third photo was the money shot. It showed the woman kissing the man in a dimly lit hallway. I picked up the third photo. I brought it closer to my face. The lighting was grainy, the angle was convenient, but the details were sloppy. The woman in the photo had a small tattoo on her neck. I have no tattoos. The woman in the photo was wearing a watch on her right wrist. I wear my Apple Watch on my left. And the most insulting detail of all was the man. He was wearing a shirt that said, "Miami Beach Spring Break 2019. I looked up at Kevin. Really, Kevin. Photoshop. And bad Photoshop at that. "Who did you hire to do this?" "A teenager on Fiverr." Kevin's face turned red. "Don't lie, Sienna. We have witnesses. We have the hotel concierge who is willing to testify that you met this man regularly. You were cheating on me. That is why you were so cold. That is why you were always working late at the library. You were with him." I put the photo down. "So this is your play. You want to accuse me of infidelity to invalidate the prenuptial agreement. But we don't have a prenuptial agreement, Kevin, and I already signed the waiver. So why are you doing this?" Mr. Sterling leaned forward. His eyes were cold and predatory. "Because, Sienna, we are not just talking about the divorce anymore. We are talking about your freedom." He pulled another document from the folder. It looked official. It had the seal of the city library system on the top. "We have reason to believe that your late nights at the library weren't just for affairs," Mr. Sterling said. "We have a sworn affidavit from a colleague of yours, a Mr. Vance. He claims that you have been systematically misappropriating funds from the archive restoration budget. He claims you have been stealing rare manuscripts and selling them on the black market." I felt a cold chill run down my spine, not because I was guilty, but because of the name, Vance. Vance was a junior archivist I had trained. I had helped him get his certification. I had recommended him for a promotion. And now Kevin had bought him. "This is ridiculous," I said, my voice steady. "I am the one who audits the restoration budget. I am the one who tracks the inventory. There is not a single penny missing." "That is not what the audit will show," Kevin said with a smirk. "You see, Sienna, when you are in charge of the numbers, it is easy to hide things. But it is also easy for someone to find things if they know where to look, or if they put things there to be found. I understood immediately. They were going to plant evidence. They were going to frame me." Kevin knew how much I loved that library. He knew my reputation as an archivist was the only thing I had outside of my secret life. He was targeting my integrity. He wasn't just trying to win the divorce. He was trying to destroy my life. He wanted me unemployable. He wanted me in prison. Why, I asked. Why go this far, Kevin? I gave you the house. I gave you the restaurant. Why are you trying to destroy me? Because you disrespected me, Kevin hissed. At the party. You walked away like you didn't care. You embarrassed me in front of my investors. And now my supply chain is messed up, and I know you did something. I don't know what you did, but I know you are bad luck. I want you gone, Sienna. I want you buried. Mr. Sterling tapped the document. Here is the deal, Sienna. We don't want to send you to jail. We just want to ensure a clean break. If you sign this addendum admitting to the infidelity and agreeing to pay Kevin spousal support of $5,000 a month for the next 2 years to cover his emotional distress, we will make this library investigation disappear. We will destroy the photos. You can go on with your sad little life. Spousal support. He wanted me to pay him. He stole my savings. He kicked me out. And now he wanted me to pay him $5,000 a month from my library salary, which would effectively bankrupt me. I looked at the documents, the fake photos, the fabricated embezzlement charges. I looked at the men sitting across from me. They looked so confident. They thought they had trapped me in a corner. They thought I was a scared woman who would do anything to avoid a scandal. They were right about one thing. I wanted to avoid a scandal. But not for me. I looked at Kevin. I really looked at him. I remembered the man I married. I remembered how he used to hold my hand when I was sick. I remembered how we used to dream about building a legacy together. I had held on to those memories for so long, using them as an excuse to forgive his selfishness, using them as a reason to help him from the shadows. But looking at him now, I realized that man was dead. Or maybe he never existed. The man sitting in front of me was a monster who was willing to send his wife to prison just to soothe his bruised ego, a monster who would ruin an innocent woman's career just to get a few extra dollars to pay for his mistress's G-Wagon. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap, it was a quiet click, like the safety coming off a gun. I had been playing defense. I had been playing to protect myself. I had been playing to teach him a lesson. But this was an act of war. You don't frame someone for a felony as a negotiation tactic. You do that when you want to kill them. And if they wanted a war, I would give them an apocalypse. I didn't just want my assets back anymore. I didn't just want him to lose the restaurant. I wanted him obliterated. I wanted to salt the earth where he stood so that nothing would ever grow there again. I wanted Mr. Sterling disbarred. I wanted Kevin in a cell. I wanted Tiffany in the cell next to him. I decided in that moment to activate the nuclear option. The nuclear option was a plan I had designed years ago as a worst-case scenario mental exercise. It involved utilizing the full weight of my financial power, the leverage of the SW Holdings legal team, and the evidence I had been gathering for years. It meant exposing everything: the tax fraud, the money laundering, the fake investors. It meant dragging everyone down into the mud, including me. Because once I revealed who I really was, my quiet life at the library would be over. My anonymity would be gone. But looking at the fake photo of me kissing a stranger, I realized my quiet life was already gone. They had taken it from me. I took a deep breath. I picked up the photos. I stacked them neatly. I picked up the library affidavit. I placed it on top of the photos. "May I have a moment?" I asked. My voice was eerily calm. Kevin smiled. He thought I was breaking. "Take all the time you need. But the offer expires when you walk out that door." I pulled out my phone. I didn't call Jessica. I sent a text to a number that was saved in my phone simply as the cleaner. It was a private investigator and forensic accountant I had on retainer for SW Holdings. The text read, "Code Red, execute Protocol 0, target Kevin Hayes and Sterling Associates. I want full forensic discovery on the law firm's trust accounts. I want the surveillance logs on Kevin's residence. And I want the IRS whistleblower line prepped for a priority call." I put the phone down. I looked at Mr. Sterling. "You made a mistake, Mr. Sterling," I said softly. He laughed. Did I? I think the only mistake was yours, Sienna, thinking you could outsmart us. No, I said. Your mistake was assuming I have something to lose. You think threatening my job at the library hurts me. You think threatening my reputation hurts me. You don't understand. The library is my hobby. It is my passion. But it is not my life. I stood up. I didn't shake. I didn't look down. I looked straight at Kevin. You want spousal support, Kevin. You want $5,000 a month. Yes, Kevin said, leaning back. I think that is fair, considering the pain you caused me. I nodded. Okay, I will give you an answer, but not today. Sit down. Sienna, Mr. Sterling barked. You don't walk out of here until you sign. If you leave, I call the district attorney. I will have you arrested before you reach the lobby. I smiled. A cold, sharp smile that didn't reach my eyes. Call him, I dared him. Call the district attorney. In fact, call the FBI too. Because when they start looking into the library accounts, they are going to find my audits. They are going to find that every single book is accounted for. And then they are going to look at who signed that affidavit. Poor Mr. Vance. I wonder how long he will last in interrogation before he tells them who paid him to lie. And when he points to you, Mr. Sterling, you won't just lose this case, you will lose your license. Mr. Sterling's face twitched. He wasn't used to being threatened by librarians. And as for you, Kevin, I continued, turning my gaze to my husband. You want to talk about fake photos? Let's talk about real ones. Let's talk about the photos of you taking cash bags out the back door of the restaurant. Let's talk about the photos of Tiffany signing invoices for vendors that don't exist. Kevin went pale. You are bluffing. Am I asked. You just accused me of being smart enough to embezzle from a government archive, but dumb enough to cheat on you in a hotel with cameras. Which is it, Kevin? Am I a criminal mastermind, or am I a fool? You can't have it both ways. I picked up my purse. I am not signing your addendum, I said, and I am not paying you $5,000. In fact, I am retracting my previous offer. The waiver I signed 2 days ago. I am challenging it under duress and fraud. You can't do that, Sterling shouted, standing up. It is a binding contract. It is void if it was signed based on fraudulent financial disclosure, I said. Kevin didn't disclose the cash income. He didn't disclose the G-Wagon. That is fraud, and fraud pierces the corporate veil. I walked to the door. My hand hovered over the handle. You have 24 hours, I said, without turning back, to withdraw these threats, to fire Mr. Vance, and to apologize. If you don't, if I see one police officer at my door, if I see one rumor about me at the library, I will release everything I have. And Kevin, you won't just be poor, you will be famous. You will be the face of the biggest tax evasion scandal in Atlanta history. I opened the door. Tick-tock, Kevin, I said. The clock is running. I walked out into the hallway. My legs were trembling now, but not from fear, from rage, pure, unadulterated rage. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button. They had pushed me too far. They had crossed the line from greed to evil. I pulled out my phone again. I had one more call to make, a call that would seal their fate. I dialed Jessica. File the papers, I said as soon as she answered. Which papers, she asked. The eviction. No, I said. The other papers. The ones we drafted for SW Holdings. The hostile takeover. Sienna. Jessica gasped. Are you sure? Once we do that, there is no going back. You will have to declare yourself. Everyone will know you are the owner. I know, I said, watching the elevator numbers go down. I don't care anymore. I am done hiding. I am done being the quiet wife. They want a villain. I will be the villain. But I will be the villain who wins. File it, Jessica, and send a copy to Mr. Sterling's personal email. I want him to read it while he is still sitting in that office thinking he won. I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, shutting out the toxic air of the 42nd floor. As the car descended, I checked my reflection in the mirrored wall. I didn't look like a librarian anymore. I looked like a CEO. I looked like a woman who was about to burn the world down to save herself. And God help anyone who stood in the flames. The silence in my car was heavy. It was the kind of silence that happens right before a tornado touches down. I sat there for a long time just staring at the phone in my lap. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. The rage that had nearly consumed me in the elevator had cooled into something hard and sharp. It felt like a blade in my chest. I knew what I had to do. I had threatened them. I had scared them. But a scared enemy is a dangerous enemy. A scared enemy is unpredictable. They fight back, they lash out, they plant evidence. If I wanted to destroy them completely, I needed them to be something else. I needed them to be arrogant. I needed them to think they had won. I remembered a quote from The Art of War. Pretend to be weak that your opponent may grow arrogant. It was the oldest trick in the book, but men like Kevin and women like Tiffany never read books. They only read bank statements and Instagram comments. They would fall for it because their egos were too big to imagine a world where they weren't the smartest people in the room. I took a deep breath. I channeled every ounce of exhaustion, every ounce of fear, and every ounce of sadness I had felt over the last 5 years. I needed to sound broken. I needed to sound like the Sienna they thought they knew, the quiet librarian, the pushover, the woman who just wanted everyone to get along. I dialed Kevin's number. It rang 4 times. He was making me wait. It was a power move. He wanted me to sweat. Finally, he picked up. "What do you want, Sienna?" he asked. His voice was loud. There was music in the background, upbeat jazz, the kind they played at the bistro during happy hour. He wasn't alone. I let my voice tremble, just a little, just enough to sound defeated. "Kevin," I said, "I am sorry to bother you." "You are bothering me," he said. "I thought you were busy destroying my reputation, or was that just a bluff?" I closed my eyes. I pictured the hostile takeover document sitting in my lawyer's outbox, scheduled to send at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. "It was a bluff," I whispered. "I don't have anything, Kevin. I was just angry. I was hurt." There was a pause on the other end. The music seemed to get quieter. He was listening now. "So you admit it," he said. "You admit you are lying." I took a deep breath. "Yes, Kevin. I admit it. I am tired. I can't do this anymore. I can't fight you. I can't fight Mr. Sterling. I don't have the money for a long legal battle. And I can't lose my job at the library. You know how much that place means to me. Please don't file those charges." I heard a muffled sound. He had put his hand over the phone. I heard whispering. It was Tiffany. I could hear her distinct, shrill voice. "I told you she would fold. She is weak." Kevin came back on the line. His voice was different now. It was dripping with smug satisfaction. It was the voice of a man who had just won the Super Bowl. "I told you, Sienna," he said. "I told you that you were out of your league. You tried to play hardball, but you don't even know the rules of the game. I know," I said, swallowing my pride. "You were right. You were always right. I am just a librarian. I don't know anything about business or law. I just want this to be over. I want my life back." He laughed. It was a cruel sound. "You want your life back. That is funny, because you don't have a life without me, Sienna. But I am a generous man. I am willing to let you walk away with your dignity. If you do exactly what I say, I will," I said quickly, "I will do whatever you want." "Okay," he said. "Here is the deal. You come to court tomorrow morning at 9 sharp. You sign the addendum. You agree to the spousal support. You admit to the infidelity on the record so my reputation is clear. And you apologize to me and to Tiffany." I gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. Apologize to Tiffany, the woman who poured wine on me, the woman who called the cops on me. "Okay," I said. My voice was barely audible. "I will apologize. Just please promise me you will destroy the affidavit about the library." "I will think about it," Kevin said. "If your apology is sincere, maybe I will shred it. But Sienna, don't you dare try anything tomorrow. If you are even 1 minute late, if you hesitate for 1 second, I will ruin you. I won't be late, I promised. I will be there. I just want to sign and leave." "Good," he said. "See you in court." "Oh, and Sienna. Yes, wear something nice. There might be press there. I want everyone to see you admitting the truth." He hung up. I lowered the phone from my ear. The screen went black. I sat there in the silence for a long time. I replayed the conversation in my head. I replayed his laughter. I replayed Tiffany's whisper. "She is weak." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It started as a sigh and turned into a laugh, a low, dry laugh. They bought it. They actually bought it. I could see them right now. I could imagine the scene perfectly. They were at the bistro, or maybe at the house. Tiffany was pouring champagne. Kevin was leaning back in his chair, his feet up on the table, telling Sarah how he handled me, telling them how he broke me. They were toasting to their victory. They were celebrating the $5,000 a month they thought they were going to get. They were celebrating the destruction of the annoying wife who asked too many questions. They were celebrating on the deck of the Titanic, and they didn't even see the iceberg. I wasn't weak. I wasn't broken. I was tactical. By surrendering tonight, I ensured that they would walk into that courtroom tomorrow unarmed. They wouldn't bring their forensic accountants. They wouldn't bring their heavy legal artillery. Why would they? The war was over. The enemy had surrendered. They would walk in with light hearts and heavy egos expecting a coronation. They had no idea they were walking into an execution. I started the car. I needed to go home. I needed to prepare. Not for a surrender, but for a reveal. As I drove back to the Airbnb, I thought about what Kevin said. Wear something nice. I smiled. Oh, I would wear something nice. I wouldn't wear the polyester suit or the Target dress. I would wear the suit I bought in Milan 3 years ago when I was there negotiating the international licensing rights for my music catalog. The suit that cost more than Tiffany's car. The suit that screamed power. I would walk into that courtroom not as Sienna the wife, not as Sienna the librarian, but as Sienna Washington, the CEO. I pulled into the driveway of the rental. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jessica. Documents are prepped. The hostile takeover notice is timed to hit their inbox at 9:01 a.m., right after court starts. Are you sure you want to do this? There is no turning back. I looked at the text. I thought about the fear in my stomach when the police officer put his hand on his taser. I thought about the shame of walking out of the restaurant with wine on my dress. I thought about the empty bank account and the stolen savings. I typed back one word: execute. I went inside and took a shower. I scrubbed my skin until it was red. I wanted to wash off the feeling of that phone call. I wanted to wash off the lie. I laid out my clothes for tomorrow: the black suit, the silk blouse, the Louboutin heels that clicked like gunshots on a marble floor. I poured myself a glass of water. I stood by the window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Kevin was sleeping soundly. He was dreaming of his G-Wagon and his freedom. He was dreaming of a life where he had erased me. Sleep tight, Kevin. Enjoy your last night as a king. Because tomorrow you are going to wake up in a world where you don't even own the pillow you are sleeping on. I turned off the light. I didn't need to pray for strength. I didn't need to pray for luck. The math was on my side. The law was on my side. And for the first time in 5 years, I was on my own side. The final offer had been made. And tomorrow, I was going to collect. The air in the Fulton County Superior Courtroom was stale and cold. It smelled of floor wax and old decisions. I walked through the double doors at exactly 8:55 in the morning. I was not wearing the polyester dress they expected. I was wearing the black Italian wool suit I had bought in Milan during a licensing negotiation 3 years ago. It was tailored to perfection, sharp enough to cut glass with a silk blouse underneath that cost more than Tiffany's entire outfit. My heels clicked against the linoleum floor with a rhythm that sounded like a clock ticking down. Click, click, click. I saw them immediately. Kevin was sitting at the plaintiff's table. He looked like he had just stepped out of a magazine. He was wearing a navy blue Tom Ford suit that fit him perfectly, a suit I had paid for. His hair was freshly cut, and he was leaning back in his chair with one arm draped over the back, radiating the casual confidence of a man who has already won. Beside him was Mr. Sterling, his shark of a lawyer, who was organizing a stack of documents with a smug grin on his face. And in the front row of the gallery sat Tiffany. She was wearing a bright floral dress that was too loud for court, holding a designer bag on her lap like a shield. When she saw me walk in, her eyes widened for a fraction of a second. She noticed the suit. She noticed the shoes. She noticed that I didn't look like the broken crying woman she had met at the coffee shop yesterday. But then the surprise faded, replaced by that familiar sneer. She leaned over the railing and whispered something to Kevin. Kevin turned around. He looked me up and down. His eyes lingered on the suit. For a moment, I saw confusion. He knew my closet. He thought he knew every cheap piece of clothing I owned. He had never seen this suit before. But then his ego took over. He winked at me, a slow, arrogant wink. He mouthed the words, "Nice try." I didn't respond. I didn't look at him. I walked past the gallery, past Tiffany, past the whispers of the few bored court clerks, and took my seat at the defendant's table. I was alone. Jessica, my lawyer, was not sitting next to me. This was part of the plan. I wanted to look vulnerable. I wanted them to think I couldn't afford representation anymore. I wanted them to think I was surrendering unconditionally. "All rise." The bailiff's voice boomed through the room. We all stood up as Judge Wallace entered. She was a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose and a reputation for hating time wasters. She sat down, adjusted her robes, and looked over the file in front of her. "Case number 4492, Hayes versus Hayes." She read, her voice bored. "We are here for a final dissolution of marriage and asset distribution. I see the petitioner is present with counsel. The respondent is self-represented." She looked at me over her glasses. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My voice was clear, steady. "I am representing myself today." Mr. Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, we are pleased to inform the court that the parties have reached an amicable agreement. Ms. Hayes has agreed to waive her right to counsel to expedite the signing of the settlement. We have the documents prepared right here." Judge Wallace looked at me. "Is this true, Ms. Hayes? Do you understand the implications of signing these documents without a lawyer present? You are waiving significant rights." I looked at the judge, then I looked at Kevin. He was staring at me with a predatory intensity. His eyes were saying, "Do it. Remember the photos. Remember the library." "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "I understand. I just want this to be over." "Very well," Judge Wallace said. "Let's proceed." Mr. Sterling outlined the terms. Mr. Sterling picked up the document. He cleared his throat, enjoying the sound of his own voice. "Your Honor, the terms are as follows. The petitioner, Mr. Kevin Hayes, will retain 100% ownership of the marital residence located at 450 Blackwood Drive. The respondent, Ms. Sienna Hayes, will vacate the property immediately. Furthermore, Mr. Hayes will retain 100% ownership of the business entity known as Kevin's Bistro LLC, including all physical assets, inventory, and equipment. Ms. Hayes waives any claim to the business's future profits or current valuation." He paused, looking at me to see if I would flinch. I sat stone still. In addition, he continued, Mr. Hayes will retain possession of the 2022 Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon and the 2021 Range Rover. Ms. Hayes will retain her personal vehicle, a 2010 Honda Civic. Finally, Ms. Hayes agrees to pay spousal support in the amount of $5,000 per month for a period of 24 months, citing the disparity in their emotional standing. Judge Wallace frowned. She looked at the papers. She looked at Kevin, who was beaming, and then at me, sitting alone in my expensive suit. The math didn't add up. Why would a woman give up a multi-million-dollar home, a successful restaurant, and agree to pay alimony when she was the one being evicted? It smelled like coercion. Ms. Hayes, the judge, asked, her voice softer now. "Have you been threatened to sign this? This division of assets is highly equitable in favor of your husband. You are essentially leaving the marriage with nothing but debt. Are you sure you want to do this?" The room went silent. I could hear Tiffany shifting in her seat behind me. I could feel Kevin's gaze burning into the side of my face. This was the moment. I could scream. I could tell the judge about the blackmail. I could tell her about the fake photos. But if I did that, the case would be delayed. There would be an investigation, assets would be frozen, and Kevin would be alerted. I needed him to sign. I needed him to legally claim the assets he thought he wanted. I stood up. I turned to face the judge. "Your Honor," I said, "I am not being threatened. I am making a choice. I am a librarian. I live a simple life. I don't need a mansion. I don't need luxury cars. And I certainly don't want to be part of a business I don't understand. My husband, my ex-husband, he is the visionary. He is the one who built the brand. He is the one who deserves the rewards." I paused, letting a note of sadness creep into my voice. "I just want peace, Your Honor. I want to move on." If giving him everything is the price of my freedom, then I am willing to pay it." Kevin let out a breath he had been holding. He smirked at Mr. Sterling. He bought the performance. He actually believed that I was just a simple woman who was overwhelmed by his greatness. Judge Wallace looked at me for a long moment. She shook her head slightly, clearly disappointed in my lack of fight. "If that is your wish, Ms. Hayes," she said, "approach the bench." Mr. Sterling walked up with the papers. I walked up beside him. Kevin followed, practically bouncing on the balls of his feet. We stood before the judge. The documents were laid out on the wooden surface. "Sign here, here, and here," Mr. Sterling said, pointing to the signature lines with a gold pen. I picked up the pen. It was a cheap black ballpoint from the court clerk's cup. I looked at the first document, Transfer of Deed. "I, Sienna Hayes, hereby quitclaim all interest in the structure and improvements located at 450 Blackwood Drive to Kevin Hayes." I signed. My signature was loopier than usual. I looked at the second document, Transfer of Business Interest. "I, Sienna Hayes, hereby resign as an officer and transfer any and all interest in the limited liability company known as Kevin's Bistro LLC to Kevin Hayes." I signed. I looked at the third document, Spousal Support Agreement. I signed that too. When I put the pen down, Kevin didn't wait. He grabbed the documents. He grabbed the pen from my hand, his fingers brushing against mine. His skin was clammy. He was sweating with excitement. He signed his name with a flourish, a big, bold signature that took up 2 lines. He signed the deed. He signed the LLC transfer. He signed the support agreement. He looked at me as he signed the last page. His eyes were dancing. He was doing mental math. He was calculating the equity in the house. He was calculating the revenue of the restaurant. He was thinking about how he was going to tell Sarah that he had pulled it off. He had stripped me bare. He had won the lottery. "Done," Kevin said, slamming the pen down. Judge Wallace took the papers. She stamped them, filed. The sound of the stamp hitting the paper echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. It was final. The assets were his. "The judgment is entered," Judge Wallace said. "You are divorced. Mr. Hayes, you are now the sole owner of the residence and the business entity. Ms. Hayes, you are ordered to begin support payments on the 1st of the month. Court is adjourned." Kevin let out a loud laugh. He couldn't help it. He turned to me, his face splitting into a wide, victorious grin. "Thank you, Sienna," he said loud enough for Tiffany to hear. "You finally did something right. You finally knew your place." Tiffany clapped her hands from the gallery. She stood up and ran to the railing. "We did it. We got it all, Mr. Sterling was shaking Kevin's hand. "Congratulations, Kevin. That was the easiest negotiation of my career." I stood there watching them celebrate. I watched Kevin high-five his lawyer. I watched Tiffany pulling out her phone to text the good news to the family. They were so happy. They were so drunk on their own greed that they didn't notice I wasn't leaving. I didn't turn to go. I didn't pick up my purse. I just stood there smoothing the fabric of my Italian suit, watching them with a calm, detached curiosity. Kevin turned to leave but stopped when he saw I hadn't moved. "What are you waiting for?" he asked, his grin turning into a sneer. "Go home, Sienna." "Oh, wait, you don't have a home. Get out of here. Go to your library." I smiled. It wasn't the sad, defeated smile I had worn for the last 3 days. It was a real smile, a sharp, dangerous smile that showed too many teeth. "I am not waiting for anything, Kevin," I said softly. "I am just admiring your new acquisitions." He laughed. "Yeah, they are beautiful, aren't they? The house, the restaurant, all mine." "Yes," I said. "You own the house, and you own the LLC. Congratulations." I looked at Mr. Sterling. The lawyer's smile faltered slightly. He saw something in my eyes. He saw the shift. He saw the predator waking up. "Mr. Sterling," I said, "did you read the documents carefully?" Mr. Sterling frowned. "Of course I did. I drafted them. And you confirmed the assets held by Kevin's Bistro LLC?" I asked. "Yes," Sterling said, looking annoyed. "The equipment, the inventory, the lease—" "Ah," I interrupted. "The lease. That is the key word, isn't it? The lease." Kevin looked confused. "What are you talking about? I own the building." "No, Kevin," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "You own the business that operates inside the building, but you don't own the building. You have a lease. So what? Kevin scoffed. I will just renew it. The landlord loves me. I looked at him with genuine pity. Kevin, I said, who is your landlord? He blinked. I don't know, some holding company. SW Holdings. I send the check to a P.O. box every month. SW Holdings, I repeated. SW Sienna, Washington. The room went deadly silent. Tiffany stopped clapping. Mr. Sterling dropped his pen. Kevin's face went slack. What Kevin whispered. I took a step forward. SW Holdings is a Delaware LLC. I said, my voice projecting clearly in the quiet courtroom. I formed it 5 years ago. I am the sole member. I am the landlord, Kevin. And as for the house, you own the structure. You own the bricks and the wood, but the land underneath it, the 2 acres in Buckhead that is also owned by SW Holdings. It is a ground lease. Kevin shook his head, taking a step back. No, that's impossible. You are a librarian. You don't have money. I laughed. A cold, dry sound. I am a ghostwriter, Kevin. I wrote the song that played at your birthday party. I own the publishing rights to 3 Grammy-winning albums. I have been paying for your lifestyle, your debts, and your mistakes for 5 years through that holding company. I looked at the stamped documents on the judge's desk. You just signed a document taking full ownership of the restaurant LLC and the house structure, which means you are now legally responsible for their debts and their contracts. I checked my watch. And as the CEO of SW Holdings, I have some bad news for my tenant. Kevin looked at Mr. Sterling. Do something? She is lying. Mr. Sterling was flipping through his files, his hands shaking. He pulled out a title search he should have done months ago. He stared at a page. His face turned the color of ash. Oh my God, Sterling whispered. She is right. The land is in a trust. The beneficiary is SW Holdings. I walked over to Kevin. I stood toe-to-toe with him. He smelled of fear now. The Tom Ford suit couldn't hide it. You wanted the house, Kevin. It's yours. But the ground lease expired this morning at 9 a.m. I am not renewing it, which means you have 48 hours to remove your house from my land. Remove the house, Kevin stammered. Brick by brick, I said, or I will bulldoze it. And the restaurant, Tiffany screamed from the gallery. What about the restaurant? I looked at her. The restaurant has a commercial lease, I said. It also has a clause about moral turpitude and criminal activity. Remember that recording you made yesterday, Tiffany? The one where you admitted to tax fraud? Tiffany gasped, covering her mouth. I am invoking the eviction clause, I said. Kevin's bistro is evicted effective immediately. I turned back to Kevin. You signed the papers, Kevin. You fought for this. You wanted to be the king of the castle. Well, congratulations. You are now the king of a pile of bricks on land you are trespassing on and the owner of a business that has no location, no supply chain, and is about to be audited by the IRS. I picked up my purse. I looked at the judge, who was watching the scene with wide eyes. Thank you, Your Honor, I said. I think we are done here. I turned and walked toward the doors. The clicking of my heels was the only sound in the room. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening behind me. I knew Kevin was screaming. I knew Tiffany was crying. I knew Mr. Sterling was realizing his career was over. He thought he had taken everything. He had no idea he had just signed his own death warrant. The sound of the gavel hitting the wooden block was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It echoed off the high ceilings of the courtroom like a gunshot. That sound signaled the end of my marriage. It signaled the end of my life as Mrs. Kevin Hayes. To everyone else in the room, it sounded like a judgment, but to me, it sounded like the starting gun of a race that I had already finished. Kevin jumped up from his chair. He didn't just stand up, he launched himself. He threw his arms in the air like he had just scored the winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. He turned to the gallery and pointed at Tiffany, who was bouncing up and down in her seat, clapping her hands like a seal. We did it! Kevin shouted, his voice booming in the quiet room. He didn't care about decorum. He didn't care about the judge, who was already packing up her files. He only cared about the win. I got it all. The house, the business, everything. Mr. Sterling, his lawyer, was smiling too. It was a greasy, satisfied smile. He began gathering the signed documents, stacking them into a neat pile. He was already mentally calculating his bonus fee. He picked up the transfer of business interest document to file it in his briefcase. But as he went to slide it in, his eyes caught something. He stopped. I watched him closely. I was the only one watching him. Kevin was too busy hugging Tiffany, who had run past the railing, to embrace him. But I was watching Mr. Sterling. I saw his hand freeze. I saw his eyes narrow behind his expensive rimless glasses. He pulled the document back out. He brought it closer to his face. He flipped to the second page, then the third. His smile didn't just fade, it evaporated. He looked at the signature page again. He looked at the clause I had added to the appendix, the clause that stated clearly, the transfer of Kevin's Bistro LLC includes all tangible assets and liabilities, but explicitly excludes any and all intellectual property rights licensed from third parties. Mr. Sterling blinked. He looked confused. He reached for the title search on the house again. He flipped through the pages frantically. His hands were starting to shake. I could see the blood draining from his face, leaving his skin a pale, sickly gray. He looked up at me. I was standing perfectly still, smoothing the lapel of my black suit. I met his gaze, and I winked. Mr. Sterling let out a small, choked sound. He grabbed Kevin's arm. Kevin was in the middle of laughing at a joke Tiffany had made. He tried to shake his lawyer off. "Not now," Sterling Kevin said, beaming. "We are celebrating. Drinks are on me. We are going to open a bottle of the vintage Dom Perignon from the cellar." "Kevin, listen to me," Sterling hissed. His voice was urgent. Panic was rising in his throat. Kevin frowned, pulling his arm away. "What is your problem, man? We won," she signed. "It is over." Sterling grabbed him harder this time, digging his fingers into the expensive fabric of Kevin's Tom Ford suit. He pulled Kevin down so their faces were inches apart. He didn't want the judge to hear. He didn't want the press to hear. But the room was so quiet that I heard every syllable. "She owns the IP rights," Sterling whispered. Kevin blinked. He looked at his lawyer like he was speaking a foreign language. What Kevin asked. "She owns the IP rights," Sterling repeated, his voice trembling. "The intellectual property. The trademarks, the name." Kevin laughed, a nervous, confused laugh. "What are you talking about?" "I own Kevin's Bistro. My name is on the door." "No," Sterling said, shaking his head violently. "You own the LLC. You own the company that operates the restaurant. But the name Kevin's Bistro is a registered trademark. I just checked the schedule. It is owned by SW Holdings. The recipes are copyrighted by SW Holdings. The logo is owned by SW Holdings." Kevin stared at him. "So what? SW Holdings is just the landlord. I will just pay them. You don't understand." Kevin Sterling said, his voice rising in pitch. "SW Holdings isn't just a landlord. It is Sienna. SW. Sienna, Washington." Kevin froze. He turned his head slowly to look at me. I was still standing there, calm, serene, the villain in his story. "She owns the name," Sterling continued, the words spilling out of him like vomit. "She owns the menu. She owns the concept. You just signed a document taking ownership of an operating company that has no right to use its own name. You can't open the doors tomorrow. You can't serve the food. You can't even turn on the neon sign. If you do, she can sue you for trademark infringement. She can sue you for every dime of revenue you make." Kevin's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The arrogance was cracking. The victory was crumbling into dust. But the house." Kevin stammered. "At least I have the house. I have the mansion. You said I own the deed." Sterling closed his eyes. He looked like he wanted to cry. He looked like a man who knew his malpractice insurance was about to be canceled. "You own the structure," Sterling whispered. "You own the bricks. You own the wood. You own the roof. But you don't own the land, Kevin." "What do you mean I don't own the land?" Kevin shouted. His voice cracked. "It is a ground lease," Sterling said. "The land under the house is held in a separate trust. The beneficiary of the trust is SW Holdings." Kevin looked at the floor. Then he looked at the ceiling. He was trying to process the magnitude of the disaster. "So I pay rent on the land." Kevin said, desperate for a lifeline. Fine, I will pay her rent. How much can it be? A few $100s. Sterling looked at the document in his hand. He swallowed hard. The ground lease was a 5-year term, Sterling said quietly. It expired. Today. Today, Kevin whispered. Today, Sterling confirmed. At 9 a.m. this morning, right when the gavel hit, the lease is over. There is no renewal clause. Kevin looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a terror so pure it was almost beautiful. He realized what that meant. If the lease is over, Sterling said, his voice barely audible, and she doesn't renew it, then you are trespassing. Your house, that beautiful $5 million mansion you fought so hard for, it is sitting on her property illegally. Kevin took a step back. He bumped into the table. She can order you to remove it, Sterling said. She can order you to tear it down. Or she can charge you whatever rent she wants. She can charge you $1 million a month, Kevin, and you signed the agreement accepting full liability for the property. You have to pay it. Tiffany, who had been listening with her mouth open, grabbed Kevin's arm. Kevin, do something. Tell him he is wrong. Tell him we won. Kevin shook her off. He looked at me. He really looked at me for the first time in years. He didn't see the wife who cooked his meals. He didn't see the woman he had cheated on. He saw the CEO. He saw the woman who had played him like a fiddle. You planned this, he whispered across the courtroom. I didn't say a word. I just nodded. One slow, deliberate nod. You set me up. Kevin shouted, his face turning red. You let me take the assets because you knew they were poison. You trapped me. I smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had just checkmated a king without losing a single pawn. The judge looked up from her paperwork. Is there a problem, gentlemen? She asked. Kevin looked at the judge. He looked at Sterling. He looked at the signed papers on the desk, the papers that bound him to a restaurant he couldn't run and a house he couldn't keep. We need to rescind, Sterling shouted at the judge. We need to withdraw the agreement. My client was misled. There was fraud. The judge took off her glasses. She looked at Sterling with ice in her eyes. Counsel, you just told me 5 minutes ago that you drafted these documents yourself. You told me your client was fully aware of the terms. The judgment has been entered. The court is adjourned. She banged the gavel one last time. That sound, that beautiful final sound. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. Kevin sank into his chair. He put his head in his hands. Tiffany started to cry, wailing about how it wasn't fair. Sterling was frantically typing on his phone, probably trying to find a bankruptcy lawyer for himself. I picked up my purse. I checked my watch. It was 10:15. I walked over to the plaintiff's table. I stood right next to Kevin. He didn't look up. He was shaking. Kevin, I said softly. He looked up. His eyes were red. He looked like a broken man. You have 48 hours, I said. What? He whispered. To move your house off my land, I said. And Kevin, don't take the towels. Those belong to the house. And since you own the house, you can keep them. But if I find a single scratch on my driveway when you move that structure, I will sue you for property damage. I turned to Tiffany. She flinched as if I was going to hit her. And Tiffany, I said, the coffee at the Golden Bean is $5. You owe me $20. Consider it interest on the loan you will never get. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. The heavy doors swung shut behind me, muffling the sound of Tiffany's sobbing and Kevin's silence. I walked down the marble hallway. The click of my heels echoed like victory music. I pulled out my phone. I had one text message. It was from my bank. Incoming wire transfer $10,000 or dollars. Source Kevin Hayes legal settlement. I laughed. He had forgotten to cancel the check. He had paid me $10,000 to ruin his life. I walked out into the bright Atlanta sun. The air tasted sweeter. The colors looked brighter. I was 32 years old. I was single. I was free. And I was the owner of the most valuable piece of dirt in Buckhead. The game was over. And I had won. The sun outside the courthouse was blinding. It was a typical humid Atlanta morning, the kind that makes your clothes stick to your skin within seconds. But I didn't feel the heat. I felt a cold, crisp clarity. I walked down the concrete steps, my heels clicking a steady rhythm that sounded like a countdown. Behind me, I could hear the heavy doors swing open. I didn't turn around, but I knew who it was. It was Kevin and Tiffany. They were stumbling out into the daylight, blinking like mole rats who had been dragged out of their hole. I reached the bottom of the steps just as a long, sleek shadow pulled up to the curb. It wasn't my battered Honda Civic. It wasn't an Uber. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom painted a deep midnight blue that looked black until the light hit it. The sunlight danced off the spirit of ecstasy on the hood. The car was a shark on wheels, silent and predatory. The back door opened. A man in a sharp black suit stepped out. It was James, my driver. He had been on my payroll for 2 years, usually driving me to board meetings in New York or London, while Kevin thought I was visiting my aunt in Alabama. "Good morning, Ms. Washington," James said, his voice low and professional. He didn't call me Mrs. Hayes. He knew better. "Good morning, James," I said. "Take me to the office. The real office." I paused before getting in. I turned around. Kevin and Tiffany were standing at the top of the stairs. They had stopped dead in their tracks. Their mouths were hanging open. They looked at the car. Then they looked at me. They looked at the Honda Civic parked 50 feet away gathering dust. Then they looked back at the Rolls-Royce. The cognitive dissonance was almost visible. Their brains couldn't process it. To them, I was Sienna the librarian, Sienna the coupon clipper, Sienna who drove a car with a broken air conditioner. Seeing me stand next to a $500,000 vehicle with a private driver was like seeing a dog stand up and start speaking French. It broke their reality. I lowered my sunglasses. I looked Kevin right in the eye. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just slid into the back seat. James closed the door with a solid, heavy thud that sealed me inside a cocoon of silence and hand-stitched leather. As the car pulled away, I picked up my phone. I opened the encrypted email app I used for SW Holdings. I typed a quick message to my legal team. Subject Operation Eviction. Body. The assets have been transferred. The trap is sprung. Send the notices. Send them all. I hit send. 1 hour later, Kevin and Tiffany were sitting in a booth at a mid-range steakhouse 3 blocks from the courthouse. They had gone there to regroup, to drink, to try and convince themselves that they had still won. Kevin had ordered a double scotch. Tiffany was aggressively texting her friends trying to spin the story before the truth got out. Kevin was staring at his phone. He was trying to log into the bank account for Kevin's Bistro LLC. He wanted to see the balance. He wanted to feel rich, but his hands were shaking so bad he kept typing the wrong password. "Calm down, Kevin." Tiffany snapped, sipping a martini. "It's just a scare tactic. She is lying. There is no way she owns the land. She is just trying to ruin the moment. We have the deed. The judge said so." "I don't know," Kevin muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead. Sterling looked scared. "I have never seen Sterling look scared." "Screw Sterling," Tiffany said. "He is a coward." "We will get a new lawyer. We have the assets. Possession is 9/10 of the law. We are moving into that house tonight, and there is nothing she can do about it." Kevin's phone buzzed on the table. It wasn't a text. It was an email notification. The screen lit up with a red alert icon. Sender SW Holdings, Legal Department. Subject, urgent notice of trademark infringement and cease and desist order. Kevin stared at it. His stomach dropped. He didn't want to open it. He wanted to throw the phone across the room. But he tapped the screen. The email opened. It was long. It was full of dense, aggressive legal language. But the bold paragraphs jumped out at him like punches to the face. "Dear Mr. Hayes, this letter serves as formal notice that your license to utilize the trademarks, logos, menu items, and trade dress associated with the brand Kevin's Bistro has been permanently revoked effective 9:00 a.m. EST today. You are currently in possession of unauthorized intellectual property owned by SW Holdings. Continued use of the name Kevin's Bistro on signage, menus, uniforms, or digital marketing constitutes willful trademark infringement. Demand. You have 24 hours to remove all physical signage from the building located at 450 Blackwood Drive. You must destroy all printed menus. You must take down the website and all social media pages utilizing the protected name. Penalty. Failure to comply within the stated time frame will result in a daily penalty of $50,000 $50,000 for every day the infringement continues. Furthermore, SW Holdings will seek treble damages for any revenue generated using our stolen IP. Kevin read the number again. $50,000. A day. He looked up at Tiffany. His face was white. She revoked the name he whispered. She wants the signs down in 24 hours. Or she is fining me $50,000 a day. Tiffany laughed nervously. She can't do that. It takes weeks to get a sign crew out there. She doesn't care, Kevin said, his voice rising. She knows that. That's the point. She wants to bankrupt me before I even open for dinner service. Before he could process the first blow, the phone buzzed again. Another email. Sender SW Holdings, Real Estate Division. Subject notice of rent adjustment and holdover tenancy. Kevin's hand trembled as he opened it. This was the one he was terrified of. This was the house, his castle. Dear Mr. Hayes, regarding the ground lease for the property at 450 Blackwood Drive, as informed by counsel, the primary lease term expired today. You are now classified as a holdover tenant occupying the land without a contract. SW Holdings is willing to offer a month-to-month extension under the following market rate terms. Previous rent, $100. Month, spousal rate. New rent, $45,000. Month, commercial trespass rate. The first month's rent and a security deposit of $90,000 are due within 24 hours. Failure to remit payment will result in immediate eviction proceedings and a lien being placed on the structure, the house, to cover the debt. Please note, if payment is not received, SW. Holdings reserves the right to demolish any unauthorized structures on the land at the owner's expense. Kevin dropped the phone. It hit the table with a clatter. $45,000, he choked out. What Tiffany asked. She raised the rent, Kevin said, staring at the wall, to $45,000 a month, and she wants a $90,000 deposit tomorrow. Tiffany went silent. Even she couldn't spin this. $45,000 a month was more than the mortgage. It was more than the restaurant made in profit during a good month. It was an impossible number. She is insane, Tiffany whispered. Who has that kind of money? I don't, Kevin said. He put his head in his hands. I have $10,000. The $10,000 she gave me. It won't even cover 3 days of the trademark fine. He looked around the restaurant. He saw people eating, laughing, living their lives. He felt like he was in a glass box that was slowly filling with water. He had signed the papers. He had agreed to take the assets as is. He had agreed to take on the liabilities. He realized then what I had done. I hadn't just taken my money and left. I had strapped a bomb to his chest and handed him the detonator, and he had pressed the button thinking it was a winning lottery ticket. He owns a restaurant he can't name. He owns a house he can't afford to keep on the ground. He owes spousal support he can't pay. And he has 24 hours to come up with $135,000, or he loses everything. Kevin stood up. His legs felt weak. Where are you going? Tiffany asked, grabbing his wrist. I have to go to the restaurant, Kevin said, his voice hollow. I have to go take down the sign. You can't do that, Tiffany hissed. It will look like we are closing. The investors will panic. We are closing, Tiffany, Kevin screamed. The entire restaurant went silent. People turned to look at the man in the Tom Ford suit having a breakdown next to the salad bar. We are closing because I don't own the name, Kevin shouted, tears streaming down his face. I don't own anything. She owns it all. He ripped his arm away from her and ran out of the steakhouse. He ran out into the heat, but he felt cold, freezing cold. He scrambled for his car keys, his hands shaking so bad he dropped them in the gutter. As he knelt down in the dirt to pick them up, ruining the knees of his expensive suit, his phone buzzed one more time. It wasn't an email. It was a notification from the smart security system at the mansion, the system he thought he owned. Alert administrator access revoked. User Kevin Hayes has been downgraded to guest. Door locks have been engaged remotely. Kevin knelt there on the pavement, clutching his keys, staring at the screen. He wasn't just broke. He was locked out. In the back of the Rolls-Royce, miles away, I watched the notification pop up on my iPad. System secured. I took a sip of the sparkling water James had handed me. It was crisp, refreshing. James, I said, looking out at the skyline. Yes, Ms. Washington. "Stop by the hardware store on the way to the office." "The hardware store, ma'am." "Yes," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "I need to buy a padlock. A big heavy one. I have a feeling my new tenant is going to be late on his rent." It took them 45 minutes to find me. I knew they were coming. I had James park the Rolls-Royce right out front of the building so they wouldn't miss it. The building was a 40-story glass tower in the heart of the financial district. It used to belong to a failed tech startup, but SW Holdings had acquired it in a distressed asset sale 6 months ago. Kevin used to drive past this building and talk about how one day he would have an office on the top floor. He used to say that the view from the penthouse was the only view fit for a king. He was right about the view, but he was wrong about the king. I was standing in the lobby wearing a white hard hat and holding a set of blueprints. The space was chaotic. Construction crews were drilling into the marble floors. Electricians were running cable for the new server room. It was loud. It smelled of dust and progress. I was discussing the placement of the new security desk with the foreman when the revolving doors spun open. Kevin and Tiffany burst in. They looked like refugees from a high society disaster. Kevin's Tom Ford suit was rumpled, and there were dark sweat stains under his arms. He had lost his tie somewhere between the courthouse and here. Tiffany was trailing behind him, her expensive heels clicking frantically on the unfinished floor trying to keep up. Her mascara had run slightly, giving her the look of a raccoon that had been caught in the headlights. "Sienna," Kevin shouted, his voice cracking over the sound of a jackhammer. The foreman looked at me. "Do you want me to call security, Ms. Washington?" I shook my head. "No. Let them through. I have 5 minutes." I handed the blueprints to the foreman and turned to face them. I took off the hard hat and handed it to an assistant. I smoothed my hair. I stood in the center of the lobby, my back to the massive floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. Kevin reached me first. He was panting. His eyes were wild. He looked around the lobby, taking in the scale of it. He looked at the workers. He looked at the expensive materials. He looked at the logo being installed behind the reception desk, a stylized S and W intertwined in gold. "You can't do this," he gasped. "You can't just destroy me like this." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had shared a bed with for 5 years. The man who had looked me in the eye this morning and told me to get out of his sight. "I am not doing anything, Kevin," I said, my voice calm. "I am renovating my office." "What are you doing?" "Stop playing games," Tiffany shrieked, stepping out from behind him. "We know what you are doing. The emails, the fines, the rent hike. It is extortion. It is illegal. We are going to sue you." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. "Sue me?" I asked. "With what money, Tiffany? You don't have a lawyer." Mr. Sterling dropped you the moment he realized his malpractice insurance wouldn't cover gross incompetence. "And you don't have any assets. Unless you count a house you don't own the land for, and a restaurant you can't name." Kevin stepped forward, his hands balled into fists. He wasn't going to hit me. He was too cowardly for that. But he wanted to intimidate me. He wanted to be the big man one last time. "Fix it, Sienna," he demanded. "Rescind the notices. Give me a new lease, a fair lease. And let me use the name. If you do that, I will let you keep the $10,000. I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He was standing in the lobby of a building I owned, begging for mercy, and he still thought he was in a position to negotiate. He still thought he could offer me crumbs. "Kevin," I said, stepping closer to him until I could smell the scotch on his breath, "you don't get to make demands anymore. You are a trespasser. You are a trademark infringer. And frankly, you are boring me." I turned to walk away. I had a meeting with the interior designer on the 30th floor. I didn't have time for this. "Don't you walk away from me," Kevin shouted, grabbing my arm. The entire lobby went silent. The jackhammer stopped. The workers froze. James, my driver, stepped out from the shadows near the elevator, his hand reaching inside his jacket. I looked down at Kevin's hand on my arm. Then I looked up at his eyes. "Let go," I said, soft and dangerous. "Or I will have you arrested for assault. And unlike the fake police report you filed on me, this one will stick." Kevin let go like my skin was made of fire. He stepped back, looking around at the construction workers who were now glaring at him. He realized he was outnumbered. Please, Sienna, he whispered, his voice breaking. Please, I will lose everything. The investors, they will kill me. The bank will foreclose. I will be on the street. I looked at him without an ounce of pity. You should have thought about that before you stole my savings, I said. You should have thought about that before you bought a G-Wagon for your mistress with the money I saved for our children. Tiffany pushed forward. Her face was twisted with hate. You are a monster, she spat. You lured him into this. You trapped him. You are just a bitter, jealous woman because he chose someone better. Better, I repeated. You mean Sarah, the hostess who is currently trying to return the G-Wagon because the payments bounced. Yes, she is definitely better. Tiffany's eyes narrowed. Listen to me, you witch. If you don't fix this, I will go to the press. I will tell them everything. I will tell them you are abusive. I will tell them you are crazy. I will make up so many lies that you will never be able to do business in this town again. I sighed. I reached into my purse. I was hoping you would say that, Tiffany. I pulled out my phone, the same phone I had used in the Golden Bean coffee shop. I unlocked it and opened the voice memo app. I found the file named Tiffany Confession. You threatened to go to the press, I said, tapping the screen. But I think there is someone else who would be much more interested in what you have to say. I turned the volume up to maximum. I held the phone out between us. Tiffany's voice rang out through the silent lobby, clear and sharp. Kevin doesn't report that. Why should he give 30% to the government when he did all the work? Kevin fired the accountant last month. He handles the books himself now. He just marks the extra food as spoilage or waste. It is a write-off. He saves money on taxes by claiming a loss on the food he actually sold for cash profit. It is genius. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy. Kevin's face had gone the color of ash. He turned slowly to look at his sister. He looked like he wanted to vomit. Tiffany stood there with her mouth open. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. She recognized the ambient noise of the coffee shop. She remembered the conversation. She realized in that moment that her arrogance had been her own noose. You recorded me, she whispered. That is illegal. Actually, I said, slipping the phone back into my purse, it is perfectly legal. Georgia is a one-party consent state, and I consented. I looked at Kevin. Your sister just admitted to federal tax evasion, Kevin. She admitted to money laundering. She admitted to falsifying business records. And she implicated you as the mastermind. Kevin looked at Tiffany with pure hatred. You told her he screamed. You told her everything. I didn't know, Tiffany sobbed. She tricked me. She acted like she was stupid. I clapped my hands once sharply to get their attention. Stop it, I commanded. I don't care whose fault it is. Here is the reality. I have copies of this recording. I have the forensic accounting logs from the supply chain freeze that prove the inventory discrepancies. I have enough evidence on this phone to send both of you to federal prison for 5 to 10 years. Kevin dropped to his knees. Literally. He sank to the dirty marble floor of the construction site, oblivious to the dust ruining his pants. Sienna, please, he begged. Don't send it. Please, I will do anything. I will sign whatever you want. Just don't send it to the IRS. I looked down at him. This was the man who had called me a charity case. This was the man who said I belonged in the gutter. Now he was kneeling in the dirt, looking up at me like I was God. Get up, Kevin, I said with disgust. You are embarrassing yourself. He stood up slowly, wiping his eyes. What do you want? He asked. I want you gone, I said. Gone, he asked. I want you out of Atlanta, I said. I want you out of the house by tonight. I want you to sign a surrender of the lease. I want you to declare bankruptcy for the LLC so my brand doesn't get tainted by your debts. And then I want you to leave. Go to Florida. Go to Texas. I don't care. But if I ever see your face in this city again... I tapped my purse. I pressed send. Kevin nodded frantically. Yes. Yes, okay. I will leave. I will go. And Tiffany, I said, turning to her. She flinched. The same goes for you, I said. You like to talk, Tiffany. You like to gossip. Well, here is the new rule. If I hear my name come out of your mouth to anyone, if I see a single social media post, if I hear a whisper, the recording goes to the IRS, and not just the recording. I will send them the invoices you signed. I will send them the bank transfer records. Tiffany nodded. Tears streaming down her face, masking her expensive foundation. I promise. I won't say a word." "Good," I said. I looked at my watch. "You have 6 hours to vacate the mansion. My security team will be there at 6 p.m. to change the locks. Anything left inside becomes the property of SW Holdings." Kevin looked at me one last time. There was no anger left in his eyes, only fear, and a strange kind of respect. He finally saw me. He finally realized that the quiet woman he had married was the most dangerous person he had ever met. "We are going," he whispered. They turned around. They walked toward the revolving doors. They didn't run this time. They walked slowly like people carrying a heavy burden. They looked small against the backdrop of the massive glass lobby. They looked like two intruders who had been kicked out of a temple. I watched them go. I watched them step out into the heat. I watched them get into Tiffany's car because Kevin didn't have one anymore. I watched them drive away into the traffic. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was the foreman. "Everything okay, Ms. Washington?" he asked. I took a deep breath. The air in the lobby smelled of dust and potential. It smelled of a new beginning. "Yes, Mike," I said, turning back to the blueprints. "Everything is perfect. Now let's talk about that wall on the 30th floor. I want to knock it down. I want an open concept. I want to be able to see the whole city, because from now on, nothing is going to block my view." The 48 hours following the courtroom showdown were a blur of destruction for Kevin and Tiffany. But for me, they were a masterclass in watching gravity do its work. It started at exactly 8 a.m. the next morning outside the building formerly known as Kevin's Bistro. I didn't go there myself. I didn't need to. I watched it on the live feed from the security cameras I had installed across the street. A massive crane was parked on the sidewalk blocking traffic. 2 men in neon vests were up in the bucket holding blowtorches. Sparks rained down onto the pavement as they cut through the steel bolts holding the massive sign in place, the sign that Kevin had spent $50,000 on, the sign that fed his ego every time he drove past. I watched as the letter K wobbled and then fell. It crashed onto the concrete, shattering into 100 pieces of neon glass and twisted metal. Then the E fell. Then the V. It was a slow public dismantling of his name. Kevin was standing on the sidewalk watching. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. He was screaming at the workers, waving his arms, but they ignored him. They had their orders from the property owner, SW Holdings. By noon, the building was a blank slate. The windows were covered in brown paper. The doors were padlocked. But the real damage was happening inside Kevin's phone. My forensic accountant had sent the final demand letter to his bank. Since Kevin's Bistro LLC was now technically operating without a location or a brand, the bank triggered the default clause on his business loans. They didn't give him 30 days. They gave him immediate notice. They froze his remaining operating capital, which was less than $12,000. I watched on my iPad as the notifications rolled in. Kevin tried to buy a coffee at a Starbucks down the street from the restaurant. Card declined. He tried to put gas in the rental car he was using since I took the Range Rover. Card declined. He was a man drowning in dry land. But the hardest blow came from Sarah. I heard about this from the valet at the St. Regis Hotel, where Sarah had been staying on Kevin's dime. Apparently, she tried to check out that afternoon. When she handed the clerk the Black American Express card linked to Kevin's business account, the machine flashed red. The clerk tried again, then a third time. The manager came out and quietly informed her that the card had been reported as lost or stolen by the primary account holder's creditor. That creditor was me. Sarah didn't handle it well. She called Kevin right there in the lobby, screaming loud enough for the guests to hear. She asked him why her card wasn't working. She asked him where the money was. Kevin must have told her the truth, or at least some version of it, because 20 minutes later, Sarah walked out of the hotel with her luggage. She didn't wait for Kevin to pick her up. She called an Uber, and she didn't call an Uber Black. She called an Uber X. She blocked his number before the car even pulled away. The G-Wagon she had been driving was parked out front. A tow truck arrived 10 minutes later. I had sent the repo order myself. As the truck dragged the white SUV away, the red bow was still on the hood, fluttering sadly in the wind. While Kevin was losing his business and his mistress Tiffany was losing her safety net. Tiffany's husband Brad was a corporate lawyer at a mid-sized firm in Buckhead. He was a man who cared about two things: his golf handicap and his billable hours. He had tolerated Tiffany's behavior for years because she was pretty and she threw good parties. But Brad was also a coward. And Brad knew who SW Holdings was. Everyone in Atlanta finance knew SW Holdings. We were the quiet giant that owned half the commercial real estate in the district. When I released the audio recording of Tiffany admitting to tax fraud, I didn't just send it to the IRS. I sent a copy to Brad's work email. I marked it, confidential liability concern regarding your spouse. I can only imagine the conversation that happened in their pristine white living room that evening. Brad knew that being married to a woman under federal investigation for tax evasion and money laundering was a death sentence for his career. If the Bar Association found out he knew about the fraud, he could be disbarred. He didn't hesitate. He didn't try to defend her. He did exactly what a man like him always does. He cut the dead weight. My source at the country club told me Brad served her with divorce papers the very next morning. He locked her out of their joint accounts citing financial misconduct. He canceled her credit cards. He even canceled her membership at the club. Tiffany Hayes, the woman who had sneered at my Target dress, was suddenly homeless, husbandless, and facing a federal indictment. She called me 3 times that day. I let it go to voicemail every time. I listened to the messages later. The first one was angry. The second one was bargaining. The third one was just sobbing. She sounded like a child who had broken a vase and was terrified of the punishment. But she wasn't a child. She was a grown woman who had tried to destroy me. And now she was learning that when you throw stones at a glass house, you better make sure you don't live in one yourself. By the end of the week, Kevin was sleeping on a friend's couch in a cramped apartment in Decatur. He had sold his Tom Ford suits to a consignment shop for pennies on the dollar just to buy food. The restaurant was gone. The house was empty, sitting dark and silent on the land I owned. Sarah was gone. Tiffany was living in a motel on the highway, waiting for her public defender to call. The empire they thought they had built was nothing but dust, and the silence they left behind was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. 3 months later, the brown paper came down from the windows of the building on Blackwood Drive. The sign that went up wasn't neon. It wasn't flashy. It was elegant hand-painted gold lettering on reclaimed wood. The library. It was my new restaurant. I didn't name it that just to spite them, though the irony was delicious. I named it that because a library is a place where everyone is welcome, where knowledge is free, and where the quiet ones are the most powerful. I didn't hire a famous celebrity chef. I didn't hire a fancy PR firm. I opened my contacts list and I made phone calls to the people who actually mattered. I called Luis, the dishwasher Kevin had fired for taking a sick day when his daughter was in the hospital. I called Maria, the prep cook Kevin used to scream at for chopping the onions too slowly. I called the entire back-of-house staff that Kevin had treated like invisible machinery. When Luis walked in for the interview, he looked terrified. He was wearing his best shirt, but I could see the fraying on the collar. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "Ms. Sienna," he said, wringing his hands, "I heard what happened with Mr. Kevin. I am sorry." "Don't be sorry, Luis," I said, standing up from the table. I poured him a cup of coffee myself. "I want to offer you a job." He looked surprised. "Doing dishes?" "No," I said. "I want you to be the kitchen manager. I know you ran that kitchen, Luis. I know you did the ordering when Kevin was too hungover to come in. I know you taught the new cooks how to grill the steaks perfectly. I watched you do it for 5 years. Luis's eyes filled with tears. "But Ms. Sienna, I don't have the experience on paper. I don't care about paper," I said. "I care about character, and I am paying you $80,000 a year, plus full health benefits for you and your daughter, fully paid." He started to cry. He tried to kiss my hand, but I stopped him. I shook his hand instead, a firm, equal handshake. I did the same for Maria. I made her the head chef. I hired back every single person Kevin had discarded, and I gave them all equity, not fake promises, real shares in the business. We weren't just a restaurant. We were a collective. On opening night, the line wrapped around the block. The food wasn't just good, it was soulful. It tasted like dignity. It tasted like redemption. The critics who used to praise Kevin's Bistro for its flashiness now praise the library for its authenticity. They wrote about the warmth of the staff. They wrote about the way the servers smiled like they actually wanted to be there. They didn't know it was because the servers owned 5% of the nightly profits. But my work wasn't done with the restaurant. I still had the money from the settlement. The $10,000 Kevin had tried to buy me off with. I added a few zeros to it from my investment accounts, and I launched the Washington Scholars Fund. It was a scholarship program specifically for young Black women who wanted to study finance and law. I didn't want them to study art history or hospitality. I wanted them to study the language of power. I wanted them to know how to read a contract. I wanted them to know what an LLC was before they got married. I wanted to build an army of women who could never be tricked, never be trapped, and never be underestimated. The first recipient was a girl named Maya. She was 19, working 2 jobs to support her family just like I used to. When I handed her the check for full tuition, she asked me why I was doing this. She asked me if I wanted anything in return. I looked at her. I saw myself in her tired eyes. "I want you to promise me one thing, Maya," I said. "Anything, Ms. Washington. I want you to promise me that you will never let a man tell you what you are worth," I said. "And if anyone ever tries to take your seat at the table, you don't just ask for a chair. You buy the whole building." Maya smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile, the kind of smile that topples empires. I knew then that I had won. I hadn't just defeated Kevin and Tiffany. I had replaced them. I had taken the space they occupied with their greed and their ego, and I had filled it with opportunity. I had turned their poison into medicine. Tonight I am standing on the balcony of my penthouse. It is the one on the 42nd floor, the one Kevin used to dream about. The wind is cool up here. The city lights of Atlanta are spread out below me like a carpet of diamonds. I can see the Buckhead district from here. I can see the dark spot where Kevin's mansion used to be before I had it demolished and turned into a community garden. I am wearing a silk robe that feels like water against my skin. I have a glass of vintage wine in my hand. Not the wine Tiffany poured on me. Better wine. Wine that I bought with my own money. For a long time I thought I was the shadow. I thought Kevin was the sun. He was so bright, so loud, so demanding of attention. I thought my job was to stand behind him to keep him cool, to make him look bigger. I thought that without him I would disappear into the darkness. But I was wrong. Shadows don't exist without light, but light doesn't need a shadow to shine. Kevin wasn't the sun. He was just a mirror. He was reflecting the light I was shining on him. He took my ideas, my money, my energy, and he reflected it back to the world as his own brilliance. And when I stopped shining, when I turned my light away, he went dark. He disappeared. I sip my wine. The city is noisy, but up here it is quiet. It is the quiet of a woman who owes nothing to anyone. They called me cold. They called me calculating. They called me a villain. And maybe I am. If being a villain means protecting your peace, protecting your assets, and refusing to be a victim, then hand me the black hat, because I wear it better than they ever wore their crowns. I look at my reflection in the glass door. I see the scar on my heart where they tried to stab me. It has healed now. It is tough leather. I pick up my phone. I have one last thing to do. I open the camera app. I record a video. If you are watching this, I say, looking into the lens. If you are sitting in your car crying because someone told you that you aren't enough, if you are working double shifts to support a partner who doesn't respect you, if you are hiding your brilliance because you are afraid of outshining the people around you, stop. I lean in closer. They are lying to you. They need you more than you need them. They are terrified of the day you wake up and realize that you are the bank. You are the prize. You are the sun. Don't wait for them to give you permission to leave. Don't wait for an apology that will never come. Pack your bags, sign the papers, and burn the bridge, because the light from the flames will show you the way to your new life. I stop the recording. I post it. Then I scroll down to the comments of my last video. Someone posted a picture. It is a grainy photo taken from a drive-through window. It shows a woman in a fast food uniform handing a bag of fries to a customer. She looks tired. Her hair is messy. She looks miserable. The caption reads, "Guess who just served me my burger, Tiffany Hayes. Karma is a waitress." I look at the photo. I don't laugh. I don't smile. I just feel a sense of balance. The universe has corrected itself. The ledger is balanced. I turn off my phone. I finish my wine. I turn back to the view. The sun is starting to rise over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. It is a new day, a new era. My name is Sienna Washington. I am 32 years old, and I am just getting started.